When a billionaire escapes to a quiet resort after a scandal, the last person he expects to see cleaning his suite is his ex-fiancée, now a single mom. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The Alpine wind swept across the private helipad as Ethan Caldwell, CEO of Caldwell Industries and the youngest business magnate in recent memory, stepped out of his chartered helicopter. He had chosen this remote mountain resort for one reason only: to disappear. After the company's headline-making scandal had turned him into a prime media target, he'd decided that an isolated lodge miles from any major city was precisely the escape he needed. It never crossed his mind that fate had other plans, that behind these grand old stone walls he would come face to face with the woman he once loved. He inhaled deeply, noticing how the crisp, pine-scented air cut through his usual tension. The sky above was painted with streaks of pink and gold as dusk began to settle over the snow-capped peaks. A cluster of staff members in neat uniforms lined the cobblestone path to greet him, offering polite smiles and low bows. Ethan's personal assistant, a diligent man named Trevor, hurried down the path behind him, struggling to keep up with his boss's brisk stride. A discreet swirl of rumors flickered in the staff's eyes, but no one dared speak openly. They had all heard about the scandal at Caldwell Industries. They knew this was the man whose face had been splashed across business magazines for days. And now, that troubled CEO had chosen their out-of-the-way luxury inn as his hideout. At first glance, the Timber Heights Resort, once a hunting lodge for old aristocrats, held a timeless elegance. Timber beams soared overhead and massive windows displayed a breathtaking panorama of evergreen forests. Around every corner, faint scents of rich cocoa and fresh pine lingered, as though the building itself exhaled the purity of the mountains. For centuries, legends claimed these peaks were home to silent watchers, creatures or spirits that protected the virtuous and punished the cruel. Local folklore or pure superstition? Ethan didn't know. But he did sense something old and mysterious clinging to the stones of this place. A middle-aged manager, Ms. Hawthorne, approached, wearing a perfectly pressed navy suit and a professional smile. "Mr. Caldwell," she said with serene warmth, "allow me to show you to your suite. It's our finest." Her tone carried no trace of judgment, just the impeccable courtesy of a woman who prided herself on her duties. Ethan nodded in gratitude. Ever since the scandal, he had grown tired of side glances and stifled whispers. This woman, at least, gave him a neutral calm. Trevor remained behind to handle the formalities, so Ethan followed Ms. Hawthorne alone down a series of winding hallways. "It's quieter this season," Ms. Hawthorne mentioned, trying to make polite conversation as they walked. "Not many guests, which should allow you the peaceful respite you need." A part of her might have known. The wealthy always hid from chaos in places like these, searching for anonymity and high-altitude isolation. She led him through a double door into a grand suite known as the Eagle's Nest. The space was all warm lighting and rustic sophistication, with fir throws draped across polished wooden chairs. A wide balcony overlooked pristine slopes of thick pine trees shimmering in the fading light. But before Ms. Hawthorne could delve into further explanation about the suite's amenities, a soft knock on the open door interrupted them. "Apologies, Ms. Hawthorne," said a young housekeeper, stepping inside with her head slightly bowed. "I came to check on the fireplace. Sometimes the chimney gets smoky." Her voice wavered with what sounded like nerves. Perhaps she was unused to meeting new VIP guests with so much at stake. Ethan turned politely to acknowledge her, and then his breath caught in his throat. Time seemed to freeze. In an instant, the light from the chandelier above, soft and golden, landed on her face, illuminating features he could never forget. Gentle eyes, a stubborn little chin he used to tease her about, and that air of quiet determination that had once enthralled him. It was Lucy Harding, the same Lucy who had been his fiancée half a decade ago, the same Lucy who had vanished right after calling off the wedding. Now she stood there in a simple resort uniform, gazing at him as though she'd seen a ghost. Their eyes locked, 1,000 unspoken memories straining between them. Lucinda Lucy Harding had been a bright scholarship student when they met in college. Their love story had blossomed amid hectic class schedules and internship interviews. She'd once called him the most persistent boy in all of New England, always chasing her down the library halls just to say hi. Back then, no one had bet a wealthy heir and a scholarship student would last. And perhaps those naysayers were right. Things had fallen apart, painfully, in the final months leading up to their planned wedding. Ethan had no idea why. Their final conversation ended with tears, heartbreak, and no answers. She had simply left him, returning his ring without explanation. Now, after half a decade, seeing her in a housekeeping uniform was so unexpected that Ethan could barely keep his composure. Lucy stiffened. She looked away, as if fearful that acknowledging him might break whatever fragile sense of stability she had built here. When she finally turned her gaze back, tears threatened to gather in her eyes, but her face held resolute calm. "I'm sorry," she murmured, almost too quietly to hear. "I didn't know you'd be here." Ms. Hawthorne glanced between the two in confusion. "You know each other?" she ventured. Her polite tone barely masked the alarm that her star guest might be upset by the presence of one of her employees. Ethan managed a nod, attempting to salvage some semblance of equilibrium. "Yes," he said, voice raspy with old emotions. We were acquainted some years ago." But 1,000 questions pounded in his head. "Why are you here? What happened to you? Why didn't you come back?" Lucy quickly stooped to examine the fireplace, her posture rigid with tension. "Let me just make sure the chimney isn't blocked," she said, focusing on her task. "It sometimes gets jammed with pine needles when the wind shifts." Her voice, though soft, carried forced efficiency. She was determined to act as if nothing more connected them than a guest and staff relationship. Ms. Hawthorne, sensing the strain, cleared her throat. "I'll just leave you to settle in, Mr. Caldwell. If you need anything, dial 0 and the front desk will assist you." She hurried out, half flustered, likely concerned about potential drama swirling around her wealthy client. Now, alone with Lucy, Ethan forced a swallow. The quiet in the suite pressed down on them until even the crackling of the fireplace felt deafening. Lucy stood, trying to keep her composure. The uniform she wore was plain, a collared shirt embroidered with the resort logo paired with a simple black skirt. A caretaker, a housekeeper. This was a far cry from the talented, brilliant woman who had once been at the top of her class. Finally, Lucy broke the silence, her voice full of controlled tremor. "I didn't know you'd choose this resort. I've been working here for a while now." She met his eyes again, those same eyes that once held all her dreams. "I'm sorry if this complicates your stay, Mr. Caldwell." Her formal address, Mr. Caldwell, slashed across him like a blade. They had been so close once, able to finish each other's sentences. Now she was a polite stranger. Before he could ask any of the infinite questions surging through his mind, another sound interrupted them. A small voice drifting in from the hallway calling, "Mom? Mom? Where are you?" Ethan froze in disbelief. "Mom?" A child's silhouette appeared in the doorway. A boy of about 4 or 5 wearing an oversized sweater and clutching a toy airplane. He had Lucy's hair color, that familiar shade of brown with a hint of copper in direct light. But the child's eyes... Ethan's heart slammed in his chest. The little boy had the same shade of gray as Ethan Caldwell himself, the same color that Lucy used to say reminded her of morning fog over the sea. The boy rubbed his eyes, looking shy, yet curious. When his gaze landed on Ethan, he hesitated, as though some instinct recognized the man but didn't know why. "Mom?" repeated the child, stepping closer to Lucy's side. Instinctively, Lucy placed a protective hand on his shoulder as if shielding him from questions that had no simple answers. She squeezed her eyes shut momentarily, struggling to gather her courage. When she opened them, they were full of quiet resignation, as though she had always known this moment might come. Ethan couldn't speak. His mind spun with the impossible truth. 1,000 half-formed words stuck in his throat, each demanding to be spoken, yet no sound emerged. The boy is Lucy's son. A single mom. The child has his eyes. That one detail hammered at Ethan's logical mind. Could that mean... But how? Why didn't she ever tell me? The seconds stretched on, thick with tension and heartbreak. Lucy swallowed hard and managed a trembling whisper. "Ethan, I want you to meet Dylan. He's my..." She paused, voice failing her. Then, more softly, "My son." Lightning might as well have struck the roof. The weight of her words crashed over him, leaving him mute, grappling with shock, yearning, and confusion. He couldn't ignore the certainty that swelled in his chest. Standing before him was not just Lucy's child, it was almost certainly his, too. In that moment, any notion of quiet retreat or hidden sanctuary shattered. This mountain resort no longer represented an escape from scandal. Instead, it was now the center of a new storm, a storm fueled by revelations of a past he thought was lost. The space seemed to shrink around them, the lodge's grandiose walls pressing closer as Ethan stared at the boy. Lucy's hand shook slightly on Dylan's shoulder, and for a moment, the only sound in that elegant suite was the distant crackle of the fireplace. Outside, dusk bled into the windows, painting the thick pine forest in deepening shades of indigo. Yet within these walls, a wholly different darkness flickered in Ethan's mind. Questions without answers, regrets that lay buried for years, and a betrayal he'd never understood. Ethan took a slow breath, forcing himself to move, to speak. But his voice came out hoarse. "Hi there. Dylan, is it?" He crouched cautiously, trying to meet the boy's eyes without overwhelming him. Something in those eyes, the same stormy gray he saw in the mirror each morning, twisted Ethan's chest with a violent ache. "I'm... Ethan." Dylan blinked, clutching his toy plane. The child's expression was uncertain, as though he sensed the moment's gravity. He didn't speak, only nodded a greeting. Then, as if recalling his manners, he offered a polite, "Hi," so soft it barely registered. Lucy tugged Dylan gently back, placing herself between him and Ethan. The subtle protective gesture felt like a barrier, an unspoken wall Lucy was determined to keep in place. Though her eyes shimmered with tears she refused to let fall, her voice remained steady. "You should go, Dylan. I'll be up in a minute," she told him. "But Mom?" The little boy hesitated, glancing at Ethan again with a new curiosity. He seemed about to say more, but finally nodded and slid past them, footsteps echoing lightly in the marble-floored corridor until the suite door thumped shut behind him. And just like that, Ethan and Lucy were alone. All the old grief, raw and unresolved, crackled in the air as tangibly as the glowing embers in the hearth. Ethan straightened up slowly, swallowing the knot in his throat. "That's your son," he managed, voice low. "Lucy, he has my eyes." His heart thundered, each beat pounding with the realization of what that likely meant. She didn't deny it, but she seemed desperate to maintain some measure of composure. The Lucy he remembered had always been genuine, wearing her emotions openly, a warm smile, a bright laugh, an unguarded sincerity. The woman before him now was different, carefully controlling her every word, as though any slip might unravel her entire world. "It's complicated," she whispered, pushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead. "I don't expect you to understand in a matter of seconds. Then help me understand." He took a step closer, an edge of pain creeping into his tone. "You vanished. I looked everywhere for you. I never got an explanation, Lucy, and now I find you here, with a child, possibly my child." Her eyes glistened as she raised them to meet his. "Don't you think I know how unfair this is?" she said, voice catching. "I never intended to see you again. I just needed to work to keep a roof over Dylan's head. When I heard the suite was booked by a Caldwell," she gave a shaky exhale. I didn't connect it to you, I swear. Your name was never mentioned. It was all so abrupt. Today, the staff said a wealthy corporate figure was checking in, but I truly had no clue it was you." The wind rattled the windows, as if the mountain itself was unsettled by the revelations unfolding. Ethan rubbed his brow, energy drained by a swirl of emotions. Anger, heartbreak, confusion, longing. For 5 years, Lucy's disappearance had been a wound he could never fully close. Now the scab was torn off in the harshest way possible, revealing fresh pain he never anticipated. "I deserve to know the truth," he said gently, forcing a steadiness he didn't feel. "Did you leave because you were pregnant?" She swallowed back tears. "Yes," she said at last, voice trembling. I found out only a month before the wedding. At first I was overjoyed. You always talked about building a future, about a family, but then—" She paused, her lips pressing into a thin line as if containing a deluge of unspoken anguish. "Things happened, things that scared me, and I decided I had to leave." Ethan's head spun. He recalled the sudden fights near the end of their engagement, moments that seemed out of character, odd phone calls that Lucy would refuse to explain, tension that made no sense given how much they'd loved each other. "What do you mean, things happened? Did someone threaten you?" His mind leapt to the possibility that his controlling father, always so concerned about the Caldwell reputation, could have intervened, or maybe Lucy's own family had demanded something. "Tell me," he pleaded, stepping even closer, urgency burning in his eyes. "Whatever it was, you shouldn't have faced it alone." Tears slipped down her cheeks, though she tried to blink them back. "That's the problem, Ethan," she whispered, voice catching. "I wasn't alone. I just couldn't see a way to protect Dylan if I stayed." Silence. Outside, a swirl of snow began drifting from the darkening sky, brushing the tall evergreens in silver whispers. Lucy pressed her palms together, as if steeling herself for an unwelcome confession. But before she could continue, a crisp knock sounded on the suite door, making them both start. Ethan suppressed a groan of frustration, clenching and unclenching his fists. Lucy dashed a hand across her eyes, regaining composure, and went to open the door. Trevor stood on the threshold, brandishing some documents and a phone. "Sir, apologies," he began, glancing uncertainly at Lucy. Then, leaning in, he spoke under his breath. "A journalist has somehow tracked your location. They're calling non-stop, looking for a statement. I think we've got a leak." Ethan rubbed his temples, mind torn between the new crisis and the personal earthquake he was living. He needed to manage the scandal that had driven him here in the first place. But how could he concentrate on corporate fires when his own heart was in chaos? Lucy exhaled, stepping aside to let Trevor in. She recognized the lines of tension in Ethan's posture. He was always like this, carrying the weight of the entire empire on his shoulders. Back in college, she used to tease him, telling him to let yourself breathe once in a while. Now, apparently, the world had given him even more burdens to bear. Trevor hesitated, noticing the raw emotion in the air. "I'm sorry to intrude. We can handle the press quietly if you prefer, but you might want to see these statements your board released, sir. They're not particularly favorable to you. Seems the board's distancing itself while you're away." Ethan dragged a hand through his hair, stepping away from Lucy. He took the documents, quickly scanning them. The text bristled with corporate language hinting at pending investigations and a need for strong leadership. The subtext was clear. Caldwell Industries wanted to hold him solely responsible for the fiasco that had rocked the brand 2 weeks ago. He muttered a curse, feeling the old corporate wariness settle over him. "Fine," he said to Trevor, forcing a momentary shift into CEO mode. "Draft a response. Emphasize that I'm here for personal recovery on advice from doctors and that I fully intend to cooperate with any internal review. I'm still at the helm." Trevor nodded, stepping back into the hallway to place a call. When the door clicked shut again, Lucy and Ethan faced each other in an uneasy hush. "It sounds like you're in trouble," she observed quietly, forgetting for a moment her own turmoil. Ethan huffed a near laugh, devoid of humor. "That's putting it mildly. My father's gone, and now the board smells blood. If they manage to push me out, Caldwell Industries will become something entirely different, stripped of everything my grandfather built." Lucy's brow furrowed. She knew how closely Ethan's identity was tied to the company and its legacy. Once, a long time ago, they dreamed of philanthropic expansions, ways to use the Caldwell resources to help underprivileged students, just like Lucy had been. That memory stung now, a reminder of who they used to be. He returned his gaze to her, forcibly veering back to the real reason his heart was pounding. "Lucy, I promise I'm not letting this conversation end. You and Dylan, there's too much we have to say." His voice softened, revealing a desperation she rarely heard from him, even in the old days. "Can we please talk? Properly?" She looked at him, torn between caution and the guilt that had plagued her since the day she left. That guilt had only grown stronger each time she looked into Dylan's gray eyes and thought of the father he didn't know. It was only fair to explain, but could she risk reopening all those wounds and involving Ethan in the danger she once fled? "I'll finish my shift," she said at last, swallowing. "Meet me later tonight, after midnight, on the second-floor balcony by the old library. Most guests are asleep then, and it's quiet. We can talk without anyone overhearing." Ethan breathed relief, nodding. "Thank you." Lucy turned to go, pausing only once to say, "Don't tell Dylan about us yet. Let me figure out how to handle that first." Then she slipped out, leaving Ethan alone in the silence of the Eagle's Nest suite, his mind alive with the echoes of revelations that threatened to overturn his life. In the corridor, Lucy steadied herself before continuing her duties, but her heart pounded, telling her this was only the beginning. For far too long she had carried the burden alone. Now everything was out in the open, or soon would be. A part of her felt a sliver of hope amid the fear. Maybe, just maybe, it was finally time to let truth replace all the secrets. Night fell slowly across the mountain resort, draping the property in shades of deep blue. A soft snowfall blanketed the tall pines outside, and lanterns along the walkways glowed with an amber warmth. By the time Lucy finished her housekeeping duties for the evening, she could feel tension crackling in the very air she breathed. Every time she caught a glimpse of her reflection in a window or a mirror, she saw the worry in her own eyes. The meeting she had promised Ethan weighed heavily on her mind, stirring memories and truths she had guarded for years. She headed to the staff quarters, where she and Dylan shared a modest room tucked under the sloping roof of the old lodge. It was far from luxurious. Faded paint, a single small window, and enough space for a twin bed and a child's cot. Yet Lucy had come to appreciate its coziness. It was theirs, a place where Dylan's laughter warmed the walls. Pushing open the door, Lucy paused on the threshold. Dylan lay dozing on the narrow bed, clutching his toy plane to his chest. For a moment she just watched him breathe, the rise and fall of his small shoulders, the quiet innocence in his sleep. She softly approached, kneeling beside him. One lamp glowed on the nightstand, revealing how much he'd grown in the last year, always sprouting taller, always with that curious spark in his eyes. Lucy brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, her thoughts twisting with guilt. Dylan had asked more than once why he didn't have a father like other kids. She gave him gentle answers about them being on their own, about how sometimes families look different. But he was at an age where questions multiplied. Now, Ethan's sudden presence threatened to shift everything. Could she let Dylan's father step into his life, knowing it would also bring back the shadows of a past that felt unfinished and dangerous. The final words she had exchanged with Ethan in his suite still echoed. "Meet me on the second-floor balcony after midnight." Lucy had never been a secretive person by nature, but over the years she'd honed the habit of staying alert and under the radar. This habit, born from necessity, had saved her from prying eyes, and from anyone who might track her down. Yet the very act of avoiding confrontation also meant she'd never really found closure. Now, the time had come to face the consequences. She gently pulled a quilt over Dylan's shoulders. He stirred, eyelids fluttering, then relaxed back into slumber. Lucy rose and tiptoed around the cramped space. She kept a small dresser for her uniforms and an old trunk for extra clothes. Carefully, she picked out a warm sweater and replaced her work shoes with sturdy boots. The temperatures at this altitude could drop drastically by midnight, and there was no sense in risking frostbite on the open balcony. Every small action, zipping up her coat, sliding on gloves, seemed a countdown to the moment she would lay everything bare in front of Ethan Caldwell. Sneaking a final look at Dylan, Lucy slipped out of the staff room. She made sure to leave a note by the door that she was working a late shift, just in case he woke. Then, hugging the shadows, she descended the back stairs that led to the second floor. The lodge at night was quiet, its corridors hushed and carpeted to muffle the steps of the few guests who roamed the halls after dinner. On occasion, Lucy passed a security guard making rounds, but they hardly spared her a glance. A housekeeper in the hallway wasn't suspicious, and so Lucy moved in near silence until she reached the old library. This part of the resort had been built decades ago, featuring heavy oak shelves filled with leather-bound volumes that smelled of dust and time. The owners rarely locked it. No one visited this corner except the occasional book enthusiast who wanted a taste of the lodge's history. Lucy's footsteps echoed softly on the wooden floor as she navigated past rows of books toward the far side. There, tall glass doors opened onto a narrow balcony. Through them, she saw the silhouette of a man standing against the railing. Ethan. His figure was outlined in the faint glow of moonlight. Snow drifted lazily from a sky dotted with stars. The hush was so absolute Lucy could almost hear her own heartbeat. Pushing the door open, she stepped onto the balcony. A rush of cold air made her catch her breath. The wind had that sharp bite that only mountain altitudes carry. Ethan turned at once, shoulders tense from waiting, eyes reflecting the silver glow of the night. The swirl of old emotions flared between them immediately. Remorse, longing, anger, and, beneath it all, a thread of something more hopeful. "I was worried you wouldn't come," he said quietly, forcing a small, grim smile. His breath plumed in the cold, merging with the white swirl of air around him. He wore a dark coat, the edges dusted with snow. "I almost didn't." Lucy kept her arms wrapped around herself, partly for warmth, but mostly for courage. "But I couldn't leave things like this, not after Dylan." She broke off, fighting the knot in her throat. The reality of sharing the truth pressed on her. She'd spent years with the secret locked away, rationalizing that it was safer for everyone if she just vanished. Now, Ethan stood no more than 2 steps away. His very presence seemed to intensify the guilt and the old heartbreak. Gently, Ethan reached out as if to touch her arm, then hesitated, letting his hand drop. "I have 1,000 questions, Lucy. I don't even know where to begin. But I want to hear your side, the truth. Why did you feel you couldn't tell me about Dylan?" Lucy exhaled a ragged breath and leaned against the balcony's railing, gazing out at the mesmerizing slope of pine trees below. "It all started before I knew I was pregnant," she began, her voice trembling. "Those last few months before our wedding, I noticed strange things. Letters addressed to me with no return address, phone calls late at night where no one would speak, just breathing. At first I thought it was nerves or my imagination. But then I found a note in my bag at the university library. It said, 'You're not good enough for a Caldwell. Know your place. I tried to brush it off as some jealous classmate messing with me. Ethan's expression darkened. You never told me this. She shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. I was scared. I didn't want to create drama, but the threats kept escalating. Someone left a photograph in my dorm mailbox. It was a picture of us dancing at that gala. Remember the night your father announced your role at Caldwell Industries? The back of the photo had these cruel words scrawled across it. If you don't walk away, you'll ruin him and yourself. I took it to mean if I refused to break off the engagement, they'd do something more drastic. Ethan's jaw set in a tight line. Are you implying my father? I don't know, Lucy admitted, voice cracking. He was never kind to me, but I can't say for certain he was behind this. Whoever it was seemed determined I'd disappear. One night I was followed on campus. I never saw who it was. They wore a hooded coat, but they grabbed my wrist and told me if I didn't want to see you destroyed, I needed to vanish. By then I'd missed 2 calls from my doctor. I only learned the next day that I was pregnant. I was terrified, Ethan. I kept thinking, what if these threats turn violent? And worse, what if your reputation is damaged because of me? I'd grown up poor on scholarships. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about that baby inside me. Her voice quivered as she remembered those weeks of paralyzing dread. She'd combed through every possibility. Should she confide in Ethan and risk these threats intensifying, or should she leave quietly, protecting him and their child from harm? Each day had felt like stepping deeper into an unlit tunnel, alone and scared of what lurked behind her. Ethan's anger flared, but it wasn't directed at Lucy. She could see his fists clenching on the railing. You should have trusted me, he said, voice rough with emotion. I would have done anything to protect you. We could have handled it together. She wiped away the tears on her cheeks. I was 23, a scholarship kid engaged to a multi-millionaire heir. I felt like an outsider in your world, always hearing whispers that I was a gold digger or a social climber, and whoever was targeting me seemed powerful. I was convinced that if I left, the threats would stop. If I was out of the picture, your name wouldn't be dragged through anything. A shaky laugh escaped her. Naive, maybe, but I thought I was doing the right thing. Ethan breathed deeply, blinking against the swirl of snow. I searched for you for over a year, hired private investigators. No one found a trace. It was as if you vanished off the face of the earth. That was intentional, Lucy murmured. I changed my phone, used cash, moved several states away. I worked odd jobs until I settled here. I needed somewhere remote to raise Dylan without fear. But it wasn't easy. Life as a single mom in hiding never is. Sometimes I almost called you, just to say, sorry, or to hear your voice, or let you know about Dylan's existence. But the memory of those threats always stopped me. Ethan closed his eyes, absorbing the weight of her confession. The wind buffeted the balcony, rustling Lucy's hair. A deep ache rooted itself in his chest. Ache for the years he lost with his son, for Lucy's isolation, for the vile intimidation that drove them apart. No matter who was behind it, they stole years from us, he said bitterly. And from Dylan. He has a right to know his father. Lucy's voice dropped to a whisper. Yes, he does. She felt the tears return, but this time there was also an undercurrent of relief. For so long she had carried the guilt of denying Dylan the chance to know where he came from. But I can't just have you walk into his life without explaining everything. And I need to be certain that the threats I faced are truly gone. If they reappear, I can't risk him being caught in the crossfire. Ethan's eyes shone with determination. We'll figure it out. If someone is still out there trying to manipulate my life, I'll find them. I won't let them hurt either of you again. She found herself remembering the traits that once made her fall for him: unstoppable resolve, unwavering devotion. It was both comforting and terrifying to witness that side of Ethan again. I can't promise anything, she managed, brushing the tears from her cheeks. "But I won't run anymore, not if we do this carefully." A grim tension remained, but the moment also held a fragile promise. They stood close now, the space between them filled with old heartbreaks and new possibilities. The slow fall of snow dusted Ethan's shoulders. Lucy could see the swirl of conflicting emotions in his face: pain at how she'd left, anger at the unknown threats, and a fierce yearning to be the father Dylan deserved. In the hush of that high balcony they formed a silent pact. To uncover the truth of the past, to protect Dylan from old ghosts, and to see if there was any hope, any at all, of forging a future that might heal some of what they'd lost. Then, movement behind the glass doors made Lucy step back. A night security guard was passing through the library, shining a flashlight along the shelves. Quickly, Ethan and Lucy slid into the shadows against the railing, hearts pounding. The guard paused, seeming to sense something off, but eventually moved on. When the beam of light vanished, Lucy and Ethan exhaled. Ethan cleared his throat softly. "I'll handle my corporate mess from here, and I'll keep this location off the radar. No one on my team needs to know about you and Dylan, not yet. Trevor is discreet, I trust him. But if you ever feel unsafe, I'll tell you," Lucy promised. "Right now, Dylan's everything to me. I won't gamble with his safety." A faint smile curved Ethan's lips, albeit a sad one. "He's everything to me too," he said quietly, and the confession stole Lucy's breath. "From the moment I saw him, Lucy, I just knew. He's mine. I want to know him." In answer, Lucy nodded, tears brimming again. "I know," she murmured. "He's going to have questions when it all comes out. I want to do this right." The night wind picked up, and a blast of cold made them both shiver. Perhaps it was the signal that this clandestine conversation, though necessary, had gone on as long as it could. Lucy stepped toward the library door, Ethan following. They paused before going inside, as if reluctant to leave the closeness of this moment. But the reality of their separate lives was too strong to ignore. Tomorrow, Lucy would have to wake up early, preparing the lodge for new guests. Ethan would continue his war with boardroom sharks and lurking paparazzi. And in the midst of it, Dylan remained unsuspecting, fast asleep in a small bed, dreaming about planes and snow. They slipped back into the library quietly, parted ways with a shared glance, and walked separate corridors into the heart of the sleeping lodge. For Lucy, every step took her closer to the staff quarters, to Dylan, to the small world she had built on her own. But now, the promise of telling her son the truth shimmered on the horizon. She could only hope that once the father and child bond began, no new threat would tear them all apart again. In the hush of that night, both Lucy and Ethan felt the mountain's silent presence, ancient and watchful. Whatever ghosts from the past remained, they would have to face them. But for the first time in a long while, neither felt quite so alone. Dawn broke over the mountain lodge, gilding the pine-covered slopes with an ethereal light. By the time the first early rising guests shuffled into the dining hall for breakfast, Lucy was already busy in her housekeeping uniform, discreetly whisking away remnants of the previous night's stay. She felt exhausted, having barely slept after her midnight conversation with Ethan. Yet there was a strange undercurrent of relief mingling with her anxiety, as if sharing her long-buried secrets had lifted a portion of the weight she'd been carrying alone for years. From the kitchen drifted the smell of fresh biscuits and coffee. Lucy paused in the hallway, remembering she'd promised Dylan a treat before he headed off to the small childcare program the resort provided for staff. But as she moved toward the staff dining area, her mind drifted to Ethan, how he had looked on that balcony, determined and wounded all at once. It stung her heart to recall the heartbreak in his eyes when he spoke of their lost years. For so long, Lucy had believed she was doing the right thing, sparing them from threats. Now she wasn't so sure if disappearing had been the brave choice or just an act of fearful desperation. Before she could dwell on her regrets, A voice intruded. "Lucy, excuse me, do you have a second?" Ms. Hawthorne, the resort manager, approached with her usual composed smile. The dark-haired manager never seemed ruffled, no matter what small crisis arose. This morning, though, she held a clipboard in one hand, an urgent expression in her eyes. Lucy quickly switched into professional mode. "Yes, of course. Is something wrong?" Ms. Hawthorne glanced up from her clipboard, her brow furrowing. "It appears we've had a few cancellations. Some last-minute changes with the high-profile guests. Actually, it's somewhat odd. We had inquiries about Mr. Caldwell's stay, but we never disclose guest information. Still, I worry word might be out that he's here. I'd like to keep everything running smoothly and maintain his privacy as requested." Lucy's pulse leaped. She knew exactly what Ms. Hawthorne feared. Paparazzi or corporate vultures trying to corner Ethan in a scandal-laden headline. "Understood," Lucy replied. "I'll be discreet." "Yes, please," Ms. Hawthorne said, a note of relief in her tone. "I may need you on the VIP floors more often. I know you've proven excellent at navigating, delicate client situations." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Besides, Mr. Caldwell himself specifically asked that you be allowed to tidy his suite whenever possible." A wave of conflicting emotions washed over Lucy. Ethan had requested her by name? Her first instinct was panic, worried staff might gossip, but Ms. Hawthorne's matter-of-fact manner suggested she simply saw it as a small preference from a wealthy client. "Sure," Lucy murmured. "I can handle that." Ms. Hawthorne nodded, awarding Lucy a grateful smile. "Thank you. I'll rely on you to keep him comfortable and unbothered by staff interruptions. If you sense any intrusion from outside parties, alert me immediately." Lucy promised she would. Then Ms. Hawthorne hurried away, issuing instructions to other employees bustling through the corridors. Alone once more, Lucy leaned against the wall, breathing deeply. She hadn't expected Ethan to request her personally. Even if part of her warmed at the thought, another part was uneasy. Managing the professional facade while grappling with personal history felt perilous. Still, they had no choice if they intended to coordinate carefully about Dylan. She continued on to the staff dining area, picking up a plate of food for Dylan. Scrambled eggs, a flaky biscuit, fresh berries. In a corner of the room, her little boy sat drawing pictures of airplanes, lost in his own world of pretend landings and takeoffs. Lucy placed the breakfast before him, running a hand gently through his hair. Dylan looked up and beamed. "Thanks, Mom." But he quickly noticed the furrow in her brow. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, sweetheart," Lucy lied gently, leaning in to kiss his forehead. "Just a busy morning." Dylan studied her with surprising perceptiveness for a 5-year-old. "You look sad. Are you sure?" She forced a smile. "I'm okay, Dill. Promise. Now eat up so you'll have energy for your day." He nodded, though she saw curiosity still linger in his eyes. It struck her that soon she'd be telling him about Ethan, about the father he'd never met. She hoped he'd be excited, not confused or scared. Perhaps more than anything, she wished she could guarantee that no harm would come from it. But all she could do was stay alert and do her best. After leaving Dylan in the care of Mrs. Summers, the sweet retired teacher who oversaw staff children, Lucy headed to the VIP floor. The elevator doors opened on a plush hallway with thick carpets and ornate light fixtures. Everything was hushed, as though the floor itself demanded respectful silence. She approached the Eagle's Nest suite with her housekeeping cart and paused. Nerves fluttered in her stomach. It felt surreal to be returning to the place where she and Ethan had confronted 5 years' worth of heartbreak the previous afternoon. She knocked quietly. "Housekeeping," she called softly. A second later, Ethan's voice answered through the door. "Come in." He sounded a little wary, as though still adjusting to this new dynamic. Lucy stepped inside, pushing her cart, and found Ethan standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, Snow-covered peaks extended in the distance like a living mural of winter splendor. He glanced over his shoulder at her entrance, his expression raw with lingering emotion. "Hey," she said, swallowing past the sudden tightness in her throat. "Hey," he replied, giving a faint smile. He was dressed in casual slacks and a sweater, quite different from the starched suits he normally wore in corporate settings. Somehow, the more relaxed attire made him appear more vulnerable. Lucy cleared her throat. I'm here to do a quick tidy-up. Ms. Hawthorne said you requested me. Is there anything in particular you need?" Ethan hesitated, jamming his hands into his pockets. "I wanted a chance to talk to you without the staff passing in and out. Also, He paused, seeming unsure how to phrase his request. "I hoped maybe you'd have a few minutes to show me around the resort. I realized I haven't ventured outside the suite since I arrived, and I'd prefer not to attract attention. If there's a quiet spot we can walk." A conflicting rush of alarm and gratitude coursed through Lucy. She understood his desire for privacy. Reporters might lurk or staff might gossip if they saw the two of them whispering in corners. "I know a back path leading to the greenhouse," she said, adjusting the towels on her cart. "It's usually empty, especially this time of day. It's about a 5-minute walk from the lodge." Relief flickered across Ethan's face. "That would be perfect. But are you sure you're comfortable with that?" She noticed an unspoken question in his eyes. "Is it safe? Will it make you anxious?" Lucy exhaled. "Yes," she said. "Let me just finish here. We'll go." She changed the linens on the massive bed, replenished toiletries, and straightened the sitting area. The mundane tasks were oddly grounding. Meanwhile, Ethan stood by, arms crossed, tension visible in his posture. The moment Lucy finished, they slipped out together, Ethan wearing a down jacket and a cap pulled low to obscure his face. In the corridor, Lucy steered him behind the main elevator, down a narrow hallway where staff typically moved unnoticed. They took a back staircase leading to a side exit seldom used by guests. The air outside was crisp, stinging Lucy's cheeks with its icy breath. Patches of fresh snow sparkled across the courtyard, and the morning sun was bright enough to reflect off every white surface like diamonds. Ethan fell into step beside her. "I never really realized how beautiful it is here," he said, his voice hushed with awe. "I was too preoccupied with my problems to notice." "It's easy to miss," Lucy acknowledged. "But it grows on you, especially when the crowds thin out. And I guess I liked being away from big cities. Less chance of being recognized or found." She shot him a sideways glance. Ethan nodded, understanding. For a moment they walked in companionable silence, letting the crunch of snow under their boots fill the gap. Lucy guided him down a gravel path that wound around the lodge grounds. Majestic pines towered above them, dusted with snow. Occasional chirps of winter birds echoed in the stillness. They reached a small greenhouse attached to a rustic cottage on the far side of the property. Once an herb garden for the resort's chefs, it had been largely abandoned except for a caretaker who visited twice a week. Lucy led Ethan through the greenhouse door, and warm, humid air embraced them, a stark contrast to the icy breeze outside. Inside, rows of clay pots and wooden shelves featured dormant plants, waiting for spring's renewal. Ethan brushed a layer of frost off one of the glass panels, gazing at the sunlight filtering through. "Thank you for bringing me here," he murmured. "I needed the fresh air, the sense that there's more to life than corporate boardrooms and crises." Lucy folded her arms, unsure how to proceed. "I'm glad you're getting a break. You said you wanted to talk?" "Yes." He turned to face her. A line of concern etched between his brows. "Last night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured Dylan. Then I remembered everything you told me about the threats. I want to help. Maybe hire a private investigator again, track down whoever was behind this. The last thing I want is for you or Dylan to keep living in fear." His earnestness tugged at Lucy's heart. She paused, pressing her fingertips against a wooden shelf. "Ethan, I'm not sure if it's wise to stir up the past. For 5 years no one's come looking for me. If the threat is truly gone, do we want to risk provoking them?" She hesitated. "But if you feel we must know who did this, I won't stop you." He stepped closer, carefully searching her face. "I won't do anything reckless, but I can't ignore the possibility that they might surface once they realize we're in contact again. This time I refuse to let them intimidate us." He softened his voice. "You deserve peace, and Dylan deserves to live openly, knowing his family." Lucy gave a shaky nod, tears threatening. "I've asked myself so many times if I did the right thing leaving. Maybe it's time we face this together, but can we keep Dylan out of it until we're sure?" "Absolutely," Ethan promised. "We'll go at your pace. I'll start discreet inquiries, see if any old leads pop up. Meanwhile, I won't step on your toes about Dylan, though I'd like to meet him in a real way someday soon. As a friend, at first, if that's best." Her throat tightened at the image of Dylan meeting Ethan, the father who shares his eyes, whose unknown presence shaped Lucy's entire life these past years. "He's such a bright kid," she whispered, half smiling. "Loves airplanes and reading. He's got a good heart. I hope he'll like you." Ethan smiled, though emotion glistened in his gaze. "I hope so too." He reached out tentatively, and Lucy allowed him to gently clasp her hand. The contact was warm, steadying her in ways she hadn't expected. "Thank you for trusting me enough to show me this place," he said. "I know this is difficult." She lowered her eyes. "It is, but maybe letting you in is the only path forward. We lost so many years. Dylan lost them. We can't get them back, but we can give him something now." They stood there in the greenhouse, the hush of dormant plants enveloping them, a small bubble of warmth in a vast winter landscape. Outside, the wind rattled the glass walls, reminding them that the world beyond these fragile panes was cold and uncertain. For a long moment, they let themselves stand in that protected space, acknowledging a fragile bond that still existed beneath the scars of separation. Eventually, Lucy drew back, mindful of the time. "I have to return to my shift soon," she said. "If I'm gone too long, Ms. Hawthorne will send someone to find me." Ethan nodded, releasing her hand. "Of course, He hesitated, reluctant to end this moment. "Thanks again. I'll keep a low profile, but if you have a spare moment later, let me know. If not, we'll figure it out." They slipped back outside into the crisp air. The midday sun was higher now, sparkling on the snowy grounds. Lucy guided Ethan back toward the lodge via the same discreet path, both careful to remain unnoticed by wandering guests. At the staff entrance, they paused. She needed to go one way, he the other. "You'll be all right?" she asked softly, glancing up at him. He managed a brief smile, though worry lingered behind his eyes. "I'll manage. And Lucy, if anything feels wrong, if you sense trouble, I'll come to you," she promised. With that, she left him, disappearing into the staff door that led to her duties, her child, and the life she had painstakingly rebuilt. As she walked, Lucy's heart pounded with a complex mixture of fear, hope, and anticipation. She couldn't deny that letting Ethan back in felt both like a risk and a relief, and she couldn't ignore the flicker of dread. If the unseen forces from her past were still out there, was the storm about to rage once again? Meanwhile, Ethan trudged through a quieter corridor that led to the elevator for his floor, face set in determination. His father was gone, but the Caldwell name still held power, and enemies. Whoever had driven Lucy away once might try again. But this time, Ethan resolved he would not be caught unaware. Dylan and Lucy deserved a life free from shadows. No matter what it took, Ethan would stand between them and whoever threatened their peace. Thus, Amid the hush of the resort's opulent corridors and the lonely echo of wind across the snowy peaks, they each walked away from the greenhouse, hearts full of questions, but also bracing for the answers they might soon uncover. Late afternoon light slanted through the windows of the resort's bustling lobby, illuminating flecks of dust swirling in the air. Lucy moved swiftly across the polished floor, intent on picking up Dylan from the childcare room before dinner. Though her duties had carried her from one end of the lodge to the other, tidying vacant suites, restocking linens, checking in with Ms. Hawthorne about an upcoming wedding party, she couldn't keep her thoughts from drifting back to Ethan. Memories of their morning walk around the greenhouse lingered like a half-remembered dream. She found Dylan seated on a colorful rug in the staff daycare, deeply absorbed in stacking plastic bricks into a precariously tall tower. Mrs. Summers greeted Lucy with her usual warm smile. "He's had a wonderful day. Asked a lot of questions, though. Said you seemed worried. Everything all right at home?" Lucy pasted on a reassuring expression. "Oh, we're fine. Probably just me being tired," she replied, kneeling beside Dylan. "Ready to go, buddy?" She gently ruffled his hair. He nodded, knocking down his tower with a dramatic flourish before grabbing his toy airplane and slipping his hand into hers. They navigated the staff corridors back to their modest room in the attic. Once inside, Lucy set Dylan up at the small table with crayons and paper, while she rummaged through the mini-fridge for dinner ingredients. She wasn't much of a cook. Juggling housekeeping hours plus single motherhood left little time for elaborate meals, but she prided herself on at least making something fresh each night. With limited groceries, she managed to whip together a simple pasta dish, simmering sauce on a portable hot plate. As she cooked, her eyes kept drifting to Dylan's drawing. He was sketching airplanes again, a fleet of them, swirling across a bright sky. But partway through, he stopped and glanced at his mother. "Mom," he said, pressing a green crayon to the paper, "did you know there's a man who looks kinda like me staying here?" His tone was innocent yet curious, and Lucy's heart lurched. Of course he would notice. Even if Ethan had maintained distance, the staff rumor mill was almost impossible to contain, and Dylan was observant. Lucy turned the stove down, cautious in her reply. "Where did you hear that, sweetie?" He shrugged. "Some older kid said a big, important business guy checked in. I saw him from far away when Ms. Hawthorne was showing him around. He had the same eyes as me. Gray." Dylan tapped his own face. "I've never seen anyone else with my eyes before." Lucy's pulse throbbed. She knelt, taking Dylan's small hands in hers. "Sometimes people share eye color even if they're not family," she said, aware of the half-lie in her words. "But yes, that guest does have gray eyes." "He didn't say anything to me," Dylan murmured, "but he looked sad. Kinda how you look sometimes." For a 5-year-old, he was too perceptive. Lucy pressed her lips together, wishing she had a simple explanation. She almost told him the truth right then, a sudden urge to break the silence. But that wouldn't be fair without preparing him properly or confirming that everything was safe. "We might talk about that soon, okay?" Lucy said gently, her voice wavering. "For now, let's just eat dinner." Dylan's brow furrowed, but he accepted her answer, returning to his drawings. Lucy finished cooking in silence, her mind churning. She and Ethan needed to decide how and when to talk to Dylan. The boy was on the brink of asking all the right questions. The slightest slip could unravel everything. She promised herself she wouldn't keep the truth from him much longer. They ate together, pasta swirls with simple tomato sauce, and Dylan chattered about his day, about how Mark in daycare had teased him for wearing airplane socks, how Mrs. Summers read them a story about a bear who wanted to fly. Lucy listened, smiling, yet her thoughts remained in turmoil. When dinner ended, she drew a quick bath for Dylan in their small washroom, set him up with soap that smelled like pine, then tidied up. The routine was a comforting anchor, reminding her of the quiet life they'd built here. Night soon fell, the lodge's lights shining amber against the snowy darkness. Lucy put Dylan to bed, reading him a short story until his eyelids drooped. Afterward, she slipped out into the hall, flicking off the overhead lamp to leave only a small nightlight for him. The corridor was hushed at this hour, most staff either asleep or rotating night shifts. Lucy glanced at the time on her phone. Nearly 9:30. She wondered if Ethan was awake, or if he was occupied with damage control regarding Caldwell Industries. The tension about the board's betrayal still weighed on him, she knew. She returned to her room, closed the door quietly, and took a seat on the edge of her narrow bed, texting Ethan with trembling fingers. "Dylan asked about you. He noticed your eyes. I told him we'd talk soon. If you're free tonight, maybe we can figure out a plan? L." For a moment she regretted pressing send, worried she was intruding, but the message read and delivered. Lucy set her phone aside and breathed, eyes flicking to Dylan's sleeping form. Even in slumber he looked so innocent, brow smoothed of all worry. She recalled that day, years ago, when she found out she was pregnant. The disbelief, the joy, the terror. She never regretted having him. He became her whole world. Yet she'd always imagined how different things could have been if she and Ethan had faced it together. Perhaps soon, Dylan would know a father's love, and that brought Lucy both hope and fear in equal measure. The phone vibrated softly. She snatched it up. A text glowed on the screen. "I'm awake. Board conference call ended. Not good news, but I'll handle it. Where can we meet? E." Her pulse quickened. Another clandestine meeting? She glanced at her sleeping son. Better to remain in the staff quarters corridor, maybe near the supply room. She typed back, "Staff corridor near the utility closet on the 3rd floor. Hardly anyone goes there at night." He replied instantly, "On my way." Lucy slipped on a cardigan, smoothed back her hair, and eased the door open. The hallway lights were dimmed. She tiptoed past other staff rooms, straining not to disturb them. At the end of the corridor, she climbed a narrow metal staircase that connected the different staff floors. Finally, she reached the 3rd floor hallway used for extra storage, stacked with mop buckets and housekeeping carts. The overhead fluorescents buzzed faintly. A single window at the far end revealed swirling snow outside. Ethan was already there when she arrived, wearing a jacket over casual clothes and a scarf draped loosely around his neck. At the sight of her, relief washed over his expression. "Thanks for meeting me," he said quietly, stepping closer. His eyes darted around, verifying they were alone. Lucy offered a half smile. "Figured it'd be private. Dylan's asleep. I only have about 20 minutes before I need to be back in case he wakes." Nodding, Ethan gently took her hand, guiding her away from the single overhead light so they stood in the shadow of some stacked boxes. "How is he?" She exhaled softly. "He's curious. He noticed your eyes, asked why you looked sad." She paused, emotion thickening her voice. "He's a smart kid, Ethan. I'm worried he'll piece things together in a clumsy way. He deserves the truth, but I don't want to scare him." A tension lined Ethan's features. "What if we introduced me as a friend first, someone you used to know in college? Then, if he's comfortable, we can ease into a deeper conversation." He swallowed. "I just don't want him to resent me for not being there, even if it wasn't my choice." Lucy squeezed his hand, guilt flooding her. "He won't resent you. He'll have questions, sure, but you're his dad. And if he sees you care, that'll matter more than anything, but it has to be done gently. He's never had a father figure." Ethan nodded, glancing at the window. Snow clung to the glass in a swirl of white. "I understand. Maybe tomorrow or the next day you could tell him I'm a friend visiting. We can spend time together in a neutral setting like the resort's game room or something. Would that be okay?" Lucy's heart pounded at the thought of Dylan meeting Ethan face to face, not just in passing. Fear warred with a cautious kind of excitement. "Yes, let's try that. I can talk to him first. Let him know a friend from my past is here and wants to hang out." Relief lit Ethan's eyes. Good, we'll take it slow. Let me know if you sense any trouble. She nodded, falling silent. She realized with a pang how natural it felt to share these parental decisions with him. Despite 5 years of distance, they still fell into a quiet partnership whenever Dylan's well-being surfaced. Lucy wondered if that would hold strong once Dylan realized the truth, or once they confronted whoever had threatened Lucy into leaving. "Any progress with your board issues?" she asked softly, shifting topics. She recalled his text about the conference call. "You mentioned it wasn't good news?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "They're trying to push me out as CEO. They claim the fiasco that rocked our stock prices is solely my responsibility. The board is scheduling a formal review next week. If I don't clear my name, they'll vote to replace me." He sighed, looking drained. "I can't let them do that. My father's legacy, my grandfather's legacy, will be twisted into something else if these corporate sharks get control. But I can't leave the resort yet, not with so many uncertain factors. I don't want to disappear on you and Dylan again." Lucy laid a gentle hand on his arm. "Maybe you should go back for a day or two to handle it. You can return. Dylan and I aren't going anywhere this time." Even as she said it, anxiety kicked up in her chest. She hated the thought of him departing so soon, but it might be necessary. He shook his head. "I can't risk paparazzi. If they see me leaving, they'll swarm this place, and I still haven't locked down who was behind those threats. I have to remain out of sight a bit longer. Let Trevor do damage control." Lucy could see the strain in the set of his shoulders. "But they'll use your absence as more ammo." Ethan's lips formed a grim line. "Probably. Still, I might be able to teleconference the board if needed. For now, I'll watch from a distance and gather leverage. They might be acting in concert with bigger players, some who might also link to the old intimidation. In corporate warfare, alliances are rarely accidental." He paused, scanning her face in the half-shadows. "I'm sorry to drag you into this mess." Lucy shook her head. "You're not dragging me. I'm already in it, remember? Our lives got tangled the moment we met. Besides," she added softly, "we share Dylan. If we can sort this out, maybe the future won't be so uncertain. For all of us." Emotion flickered in Ethan's eyes. He leaned a fraction closer, the silence intimate. Lucy recalled how, years ago, a moment like this might have led to a gentle kiss or a tender embrace, before the wedge of fear drove them apart. Part of her still yearned for that closeness, but the time for such gestures was fraught with too many unspoken barriers, so she merely held his gaze, letting him see her sincerity. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving me this second chance." Lucy's lips curved into a sad smile. "We'll make the best of it. Now, I should go check on Dylan." They lingered a moment longer, reluctant to end this stolen moment. Then Lucy pulled away, footsteps echoing softly on the linoleum floor. Ethan watched her vanish down the staff staircase, the fleeting sense of her warmth trailing after her. He exhaled, feeling the chill in the corridor intensify. The path ahead was unclear, a looming board battle, a child waiting to discover the truth about his father, and the question of whether old threats might resurface. Yet for the first time in years, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. He was no longer ignorant of his son's existence, nor powerless to protect Lucy. He intended to stand firm no matter what obstacles emerged. After Lucy's footsteps faded, he turned toward the elevator that would carry him back to the VIP floor. He needed to plan carefully, to watch for any sign of sabotage or hidden enemies. And most importantly, to be ready for the moment he would finally meet his son in earnest. The notion stirred both joy and fear in him, but he would not turn back. He couldn't lose them again. Under the silent hush of night, the lodge's lights seemed to flicker with anticipation. Snow battered the windows, as if the mountains themselves braced for the storms of truth soon to come. Early the next morning, Lucy woke before her alarm went off. In the murky pre-dawn light, she watched Dylan's peaceful face from her place on the small bed beside him. Her boy had rolled onto his stomach at some point in the night, an airplane figurine tucked under his palm. She felt a pang of anticipation and dread, knowing that by day's end he might meet the father he had never known. She dressed quietly, careful not to wake him, and tiptoed out into the corridor. Although her shift wouldn't start for another hour, she wanted a moment's reflection in the still silent lodge. The staff hallways were dim, illuminated only by a few low-watt bulbs overhead. Outside, the blizzard that had been raging before dawn had subsided into a gentle swirl of snow, leaving a pristine blanket draped over every rooftop and pine branch. Lucy wandered down to the main lobby, which felt almost cathedral-like when empty. Large windows offered a view of the snowy mountains now touched by the faintest pink of sunrise. For a moment she allowed herself to breathe in the hush, remembering how uncertain her life had felt when she first arrived at Timber Heights Resort. She had been 5 months pregnant, terrified and alone. Over time, the lodge became a sanctuary for her, a safe pocket of the world where no one asked too many questions. She thought of Ethan, how his reappearance had shattered her careful routine. Despite the fear of old threats returning, a warmth built in her chest, knowing he cared enough to fight for Dylan's future. Maybe, after all the heartbreak and distance, there was a path to something better. Co-parenting at least, if not more. Lucy pushed that last thought away quickly. It was too soon to fantasize about a real reunion. They needed to focus on telling Dylan gently and avoiding any re-emergence of the unknown enemy that once threatened her life. The clank of a rolling suitcase across the tile made her turn. A middle-aged woman in a ski jacket and thick scarf was dragging her luggage toward the front desk, checking out early, it seemed. Lucy stepped back, letting the guest pass. She noted the faint worry etched on the woman's face. Anxious travelers on winter roads, perhaps. In a matter of seconds, the quiet returned, leaving Lucy once again with her thoughts. A ping from her phone startled her. She pulled it from her pocket to see a message from Ms. Hawthorne. Important. VIP guests arriving mid-afternoon. Please prepare the Winterfell suite for Mr. Caldwell's business associate. Need your best attention on this. Can you come by my office before your shift? Thanks. Lucy frowned slightly. Another VIP linked to Ethan? She hadn't heard him mention any visitors. Maybe the board was sending someone to coax him into returning? Or was it someone loyal to him? She typed a quick reply that she'd be there and pocketed her phone. She glanced at the grand clock above the fireplace, still 20 minutes until her official start. Deciding to take advantage of that small window, she turned and strode toward a hallway that led to the lodge's older wing, seldom used by guests. One particular room there had been converted into a humble chapel-like space, housing old photographs and letters from the lodge's early history. Hardly anyone visited it, so Lucy had made it her private retreat. Stepping inside, she inhaled the musty smell of antique wood. The space was small, a few worn chairs, a dusty cabinet. Sunlight from a narrow window traced patterns on the floor. On one wall hung a large framed photograph of the lodge in its earliest days, a hunting retreat for aristocrats, all grins and rifles. Lucy sometimes found an odd comfort in these relics of the past, a reminder that every building contained echoes of bygone eras, and every life had chapters that felt like distant memories. She stood there, letting a quiet calm settle over her, only to hear someone clearing his throat behind her. She whirled, heart pounding, half expecting it might be Ms. Hawthorne come to fetch her early. Instead, she saw Ethan, hands raised in a gentle, "sorry to startle you" gesture. He stood by the threshold, wearing a simple sweater and dark slacks. His gray eyes held a mix of apology and hesitation. I didn't mean to sneak up," he said softly. "I was roaming the halls, trying to avoid prying eyes. I spotted you coming in. Mind if I join?" Lucy relaxed her shoulders, nodding. "No, it's fine. Not many people know about this room." He stepped carefully inside, scanning the old photographs. "I thought I knew every inch of this lodge by now, but clearly not." A small smile touched his lips as he studied the black and white images. Then his attention returned to her. "Are you okay? You look pensive." She sighed, folding her arms, thinking about the day ahead. "Ms. Hawthorne wants me to prepare a suite for a business associate of yours. Is that something you arranged?" Ethan shook his head. "I have no idea who that might be. The board members were pressuring me for a meeting, but I never invited anyone. Maybe they took the liberty of sending an envoy. Hard to say." Concern prickled at Lucy. "Could it be an enemy? Trying to corner you here?" Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. "Possibly. But I can't block them from booking a room. If it's legitimate business, we'll handle it. If it's something else..." His eyes flashed with steely resolve. "I'll be ready." Lucy tried to mask her unease. She glanced at the time again. "We need to keep an eye on them, whoever it is. The fewer unknown factors, the better. But about Dylan..." She paused, fiddling with the hem of her uniform's sleeve. "I'm going to talk to him after lunch. I'll tell him an old college friend of mine is here, someone nice who'd like to meet him. Then maybe you can drop by the lounge where staff kids sometimes hang out when their parents are on break." Ethan's expression brightened, though nervousness lingered. "That sounds good. I'll follow your lead. I just want to see him, hear his voice up close. If he's comfortable, we can keep talking, but I won't push." A wave of gratitude swept through Lucy. She remembered how younger Ethan, ambitious and sometimes headstrong, might have rushed in, confident he could fix any problem. The Ethan before her now seemed gentler, perhaps tempered by the years of loss and regret. "Thank you," she said softly, "for understanding. I promise we'll find the right moment to tell him the full truth." He nodded, and for a moment they lapsed into a calm silence, both absorbing the magnitude of what was about to happen. The hush was broken by Lucy's phone vibrating once more, this time with a message from Ms. Hawthorne urging her to meet immediately. She let out a small groan. "Duty calls. I'd better go." She slipped her phone away and looked up at Ethan. "You'll stay low profile until we figure out who this business associate is?" "Don't worry," Ethan said, a reassuring curve to his lips. "I'll keep to back corridors and that greenhouse you showed me if I need fresh air, and I have Trevor preparing to do some intelligence work on the side. I'm not walking into any trap unawares." His confidence steadied her. She gave him a quick nod and turned toward the door. Before stepping away, she paused, something else nagging at her. "Are you managing all right otherwise? You've got a lot on your plate." Ethan's gaze dipped. "Truthfully, it's overwhelming. The corporate fiasco, the fatherhood bombshell. But I'd choose being here with you and Dylan over letting fear keep us apart again." His voice softened. "I mean that." A lump formed in Lucy's throat. She remembered the countless nights she'd lain awake imagining what might have happened if they'd faced the threat hand in hand back then. She offered a quiet, grateful smile. "Then I guess we're doing this together." He reached out as though to brush her arm, but the sound of distant footsteps in the hall made them both freeze. Quickly, they stepped apart, adopting neutral postures. A staffer hustled by, oblivious to their presence in the old room. Once the footsteps receded, Lucy slipped through the doorway, Ethan close behind. They parted ways silently in the corridor, sharing a final glance that conveyed every ounce of the tension swirling around them. Ms. Hawthorne's office was small but impeccably organized. A glass desk, a leather chair, neatly labeled binders lining the shelves. She motioned for Lucy to sit and then launched into her instructions. The Winterfell suite is on the second floor, opposite the library wing. It hasn't been used in weeks, so it may need a thorough cleaning and fresh linens. This guest, Mr. Mathers, apparently, requested certain amenities: a private desk, a secure Wi-Fi connection, and minimal staff intrusion. Lucy nodded, taking mental notes. "Do we know how long he's staying?" "Just said indefinitely. Paid a premium for flexibility." Ms. Hawthorne clicked her pen. "He arrives around 3 this afternoon. Think you could manage getting it pristine by then?" I can assign Danny to help you if needed." "I'll handle it," Lucy said. "What's his connection to Mr. Caldwell?" The manager's eyebrows rose. He didn't specify, only that he's here on business. But from the note in our system, it sounded like he expected to meet Mr. Caldwell at some point. She shrugged. "We'll give him the best service possible. The rest is up to them." Lucy forced a polite smile. "Understood. I'll start preparing right away." As she left Ms. Hawthorne's office, worry churned in her gut. A new VIP, indefinite stay, presumably wanting to see Ethan, it felt ominous. She just prayed this Mr. Mathers wasn't a link to the shadowy threats of the past. Yet she recalled Ethan's promise. "I'll be ready." Gathering her housekeeping cart, Lucy made her way to the Winterfell suite. The corridor was quiet, only a couple of staffers moving about. She paused at the suite's heavy wooden door, fished out the master key, and let herself in. The space had high ceilings with timber beams, a stone fireplace, and large windows overlooking the slopes. Despite the grandeur, it smelled stale from disuse. Lucy opened windows to air it out, then set about stripping old linens, dusting surfaces, and vacuuming carpets. Hours passed in focused work, occasionally broken by staff radio chatter on her walkie-talkie, calls about towels, requests for guidance. After ensuring the bedroom was spotless and the private study tidy, Lucy took a break, stepping onto the balcony to catch her breath. The midday sun beamed off snowy mountains, so bright it made her squint. She wondered if Ethan was somewhere on the grounds, maybe ducking paparazzi or planning his approach to the father-son introduction. Her heart fluttered anxiously. She resolved to find Dylan around lunchtime, lead him to the lounge near the kids' area, and text Ethan. They'd make the friendly introduction attempt. Lucy swallowed her nerves, determined to manage it with as much calm as she could muster. Once the suite was nearly perfect, Lucy placed new toiletries in the bathroom and gave one final polish to the mirrors. By then, it was almost 1 p.m. She hurriedly stowed her supplies, planning to fetch Dylan. But just as she wheeled the housekeeping cart into the hall, Ms. Hawthorne arrived, accompanied by a man in a tailored overcoat and wire-rimmed glasses. He had short, graying hair and carried an air of quiet self-assurance. "Ah, Lucy," the manager said briskly. "This is Mr. Mathers. He arrived earlier than scheduled. Could you give him a quick walkthrough?" Lucy's pulse jumped. So this was the associate. Up close, she noted something about his eyes. Keen, calculating, with a polite smile that never quite reached them. She forced her best hospitality smile. "Certainly. Welcome, Mr. Mathers. Right this way." He gave a curt nod, glancing around. "Thank you, Ms. Harding," Lucy replied, opening the suite door for him. "Let me show you the living area and office space." They entered the suite together. Lucy pointed out the amenities, the fireplace, and how to reach room service. "If you need anything, just dial 0. We can provide additional supplies or privacy as you prefer." "Appreciated," Mathers said in a measured tone. He set down his briefcase on the coffee table, eyeing the surroundings. "And Mr. Caldwell, he's also staying here, right?" Lucy's nerves buzzed. "Yes, sir," she said carefully. "He's in a separate suite on the top floor." Mathers caught her gaze, a faint hint of curiosity in his expression. "Good. I'll want to speak with him at his earliest convenience. Let's keep this low profile if you don't mind." "Of course." Lucy tried not to show any discomfort. Ms. Hawthorne, from the threshold, took that as her cue to leave. "I'll let you settle in, Mr. Mathers. Lucy will ensure you have everything you need," she said, then exited, quietly closing the door. Alone, Lucy felt Mathers's gaze flick over her again, assessing, perhaps. "You've worked here long?" he asked. "About 5 years," she answered, adopting a neutral smile. "I can confirm the suite meets your standards, then give you privacy. Would you like help unpacking?" He waved a dismissive hand. "No need. I'm fine." He paused, glancing at her uniform. "But if you wouldn't mind, let Mr. Caldwell know I'm here. Just mention the name Mathers. He'll understand." Her heart thumped. Did Ethan actually know him, or was this man simply presuming? Either way, Lucy remained polite. "I'll pass the message along as soon as possible, sir." Mathers nodded, turning away to inspect the fireplace. Sensing she was dismissed, Lucy backed out of the suite. Once in the hallway, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. There was something unsettling about Mr. Mathers, his manner calm yet subtly intense, as though he was used to controlling conversations. She quickly retrieved her phone, shooting Ethan a text. "Mathers arrived early. Already asked for you. Seems serious. Be cautious." No immediate reply. Lucy stifled her worry, deciding she'd quickly check on Dylan before dealing with anything else. The plan was to bring Dylan to the lounge around 2 p.m. for a snack, then let Ethan appear casually. Yes, that would be the plan, unless the presence of Mathers upended everything. Hurrying to the staff daycare, Lucy found Dylan coloring on the floor, his mouth stained with juice from a recent snack. He broke into a grin upon seeing her. "Mom! Hey, champ!" she said, crouching beside him. "Want to take a walk with me in the lounge? We can see if they have any games, maybe get something yummy from the snack bar." Dylan's eyes lit up. "Yes, please." He bounded to his feet, gathering crayons into a small box. Mrs. Summers nodded approval, and Lucy led her son out to the lounge area, a cozy corner of the lodge with plush couches, a foosball table, and shelves of board games. A few other children were there, mostly older than Dylan, chatting or playing under the watchful eye of a staff volunteer. Lucy settled Dylan at a table, picking up a checkers set. Her hands trembled a bit as she fumbled with the pieces, so she focused on keeping calm. After all, Ethan wasn't there yet, and maybe the introduction would take place gently. "Let's play, buddy," she said, forcing cheerfulness. They arranged the checkers and Dylan eagerly made the first move. Lucy managed to offer half of her attention to the game, the other half scanning the lounge's entrance. Minutes ticked by. She wanted to text Ethan again, but that might draw Dylan's curiosity. So she waited. Move after move. Dylan inched his pieces forward, crowing whenever he jumped hers. Finally, at about 2:15, Ethan stepped quietly into the lounge. He wore a casual sweater and carried a warm smile that verged on nervous. Lucy caught his eye, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Then she turned to Dylan. "Hey, sweetheart, this is my friend from college. Ethan, he's visiting for a bit. Mind if he says hi?" Dylan twisted in his chair, staring wide-eyed at Ethan. Those identical gray eyes locked for a moment, and Lucy's heart clenched. Dylan's hand hovered over the checkerboard, forgetting he was in the middle of a game. 1,000 questions flickered across his young face. Lucy braced herself for any reaction. Confusion, nerves, maybe curiosity. Ethan approached slowly, crouching to Dylan's level. "Hi," he said softly. "You must be Dylan. Your mom's told me how good you are at drawing airplanes." Dylan blinked as though weighing Ethan's voice and appearance. After a brief pause, he said shyly, "Uh-huh, I like airplanes. Are you here on vacation?" Ethan glanced at Lucy, then back to Dylan. "Kind of. It's like a work vacation. Your mom and I used to study together. I thought I'd come say hi." A moment of silence. Dylan looked Ethan up and down, taking in the familiar gray eyes, the gentle tone. Then he said, "Want to play checkers with us?" Relief washed over Lucy like a wave. She cast a grateful look at Ethan, who smiled back, eyes shining with emotion. "I'd love to," he said. He carefully took a seat, positioning himself beside Dylan. The boy showed him how he'd lined up the pieces. Lucy scooted over, letting them bond naturally. For a few minutes, the world shrank to just the three of them, huddled around a simple board game in a quiet lounge. Lucy's heart brimmed with hope and trepidation. Here, in this unassuming moment, her son was meeting his father, though he didn't yet know the full truth. But Ethan's soft encouragement, Dylan's shy excitement, it felt like a spark of possibility. Despite shadowy threats, corporate battles, and her own lingering guilt, Lucy allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were forging a path to something good. From the lounge doorway, Ms. Hawthorne passed by, offered them a curious glance, then moved on without intruding. Meanwhile, at the other end of the lodge, Mr. Mathers likely sat in his suite, possibly plotting the next step of whatever confrontation he planned with Ethan. Yet for now, Lucy focused on the bright grin lighting up Dylan's face. One step at a time, she reminded herself. One moment of hope amid the uncertain storm. The next hour passed in a gentle flurry of laughter, quiet conversation, and, surprisingly, raucous giggles whenever Dylan managed to jump 2 of Ethan's checker pieces in one move. Lucy sat back at the little table, letting the 2 of them talk. On the surface, they discussed simple things: favorite snacks, the pictures Dylan liked to draw, Ethan's alleged and clumsy skills at board games. Beneath those trivial exchanges lay a deeper current of emotions that Lucy sensed in every glance. She watched Ethan's smile grow more unguarded with each of Dylan's excited exclamations. The tension and sorrow she'd once seen etched into his face seemed to recede, replaced by a cautious joy. It made Lucy's heart ache with a strange blend of gratitude and regret. How different might life have been if they'd shared all this from the start, if no one had threatened her into running. Still, for the moment, she allowed herself to savor the unlikely peace of this small bubble of time. Other children came and went, drawn by the foosball table or the snack station at the lounge's corner. A couple of staff members peeked in to greet Lucy, giving polite nods to Ethan as well. No one seemed to suspect that a father and son were meeting for the first time under a false pretense of just a family friend. Eventually, Lucy noticed the clock on the lounge wall creeping toward mid-afternoon. She would have to resume her shift soon, especially with a VIP occupant in the Winterfell suite. Dylan was due for his daily outdoor play in the staff courtyard, and Ethan had to tread carefully now that Mr. Mathers had arrived. The memory of that unsettling man's gaze made her stomach flip. She cleared her throat gently. "Dylan, honey, we should probably wrap up the game so I can get back to work," she said, standing. "How about you pick up the pieces while I talk to Mr. Ethan for a minute?" Dylan pouted only a little. "Aw, but I was winning." He brightened, scooping up the checkers into the box. "We can play again later, right?" His earnest gaze darted to Ethan. Ethan nodded eagerly. "I'd like that a lot." He ruffled Dylan's hair, an affection that came so naturally it startled Lucy, and maybe startled him too, because he paused, pulling back with eyes suddenly bright. Lucy swallowed a lump in her throat, urging calm. Dylan beamed, evidently pleased, and hopped down to push the checkers box onto the toy shelf. Lucy gestured for Ethan to step aside, near the lounge's entry. Quietly, she said, "Thank you for taking it slow. He seems to have taken to you without any fuss." Her voice trembled with a subdued relief. Ethan exhaled, glancing over at the boy. "He's incredible. I can't believe he's so open and curious. I was afraid he might sense something was off." A tender smile tugged at Lucy's lips. "We might not be able to keep the old friend story up forever. Dylan's no fool. But for now, this is fine. One step at a time." He nodded. "Agreed." Then his expression darkened slightly. "By the way, I got your text about Mathers. He hasn't contacted me directly yet, but Trevor's trying to do some research on him. If he's truly a business associate from the board, we'll know soon enough." "Did you see him around?" she asked. "He came early. I showed him into the suite, and he seemed, well, difficult to read, but definitely purposeful. He asked for you by name." Ethan frowned. "He might be an emissary from a faction on the board, or he could be someone outside the company altogether, trying to corner me. I'll keep my guard up." A quick, forced smile. "But let's not overshadow this moment with that. I'll figure out what he wants soon." Lucy nodded, aware that Dylan was now hovering nearby, ear cocked in mild curiosity. She leaned in and said softly, "Dylan, do you want to show Ethan the courtyard? There's a little area where we feed birds sometimes. I have a few spare minutes." The child's face lit up. "Yes! We put seed out for the chickadees. They come right up to the fence." Then he grabbed Ethan's hand and tugged him toward the hallway with a carefree grin. "Come on, I'll show you." Ethan looked startled but pleased by the boy's enthusiasm. Lucy let them walk ahead, a swirl of warmth in her chest. She could almost pretend this was normal. A father and mother strolling with their child through a quiet lodge. If only the illusions of safety and unity could last forever. Outside in the staff courtyard, the air was crisp, the sun shining brightly off fresh snow. A low wooden fence enclosed the small space, meant for staff to take breaks. Lucy opened a little tin container with bird seed, which she stored behind a potted evergreen. Dylan took a handful and scattered it across the fence rail. Sure enough, within seconds, small birds darted down from nearby branches. Lucy pointed out different species to Ethan: mountain chickadees, nuthatches, once even a curious jay. Dylan, enthralled, whispered, "Look, Mr. Ethan, that one is so tiny." He tiptoed closer, trying to keep quiet so he wouldn't scare the birds. Ethan crouched beside him, equally mesmerized. Lucy watched them, her heart pounding with both joy and sorrow. Every small display of paternal affection reminded her of the lost years. But at least they were here now, forging a tender bond in the hush of a snowy courtyard. They stayed like that for 10 minutes, maybe 15, until Lucy's phone chimed with a staff alert. She was needed to address a minor housekeeping shortage on the 3rd floor. Duty called yet again. She ushered them gently inside, trying to hide her regret that this moment had to end so soon. While Dylan scampered ahead, Lucy paused with Ethan beneath the covered walkway leading back into the resort. She lowered her voice. "I have to go handle something," she said. "Maybe you can return to your suite or the greenhouse, unless you want to talk to Mathers." Ethan raked a hand through his hair, expression torn. "I'm not sure if I should confront him alone, but I can't avoid him forever. If he's allied with the board, he might have an agenda that can't wait." He glanced at Dylan, who was twirling in circles in the corridor, completely oblivious to adult woes. "But I'd rather not do it around Dylan." Lucy laid a hand on his forearm gently. "I can keep Dylan with me. He's used to being in the staff daycare if I get busy. Why don't you discreetly swing by the Winterfell suite, see what Mathers wants? I'll message you if something comes up." He nodded, forcing a confident look. "All right, I'll handle it. Don't worry." They exchanged a last glance. Then Lucy guided Dylan off toward the staff floors, telling him she had to work, but that he could color or play with the other children until dinner time. Ethan, alone now, drew a bracing breath and turned in the opposite direction, heading for the 2nd floor. As he walked the corridor, he passed groups of tourists, older couples wearing winter coats, a family with boisterous kids chattering about skiing. None seemed to pay him any mind. Perhaps the world had not yet discovered that the scandal-plagued CEO was hiding here. Reaching the Winterfell suite, Ethan paused. The door was closed, an understated gold plaque reading "Private." He debated knocking, or should he call Trevor for backup first? But these were the sorts of battles he'd have to face if he intended to keep control of Caldwell Industries. Straightening his shoulders, he gave 3 firm raps on the door. A muffled voice answered, "Come in." Inside, Ethan found Mr. Mathers by the window, gazing out at the snow. The man turned upon hearing Ethan's entrance, his expression unreadable behind those wire-rimmed glasses. The suite was as Lucy had prepared, pristine, warm, a crackling fire in the stone hearth. "Mathers," Ethan said, tension coiled in his gut. "You wanted to see me?" "Yes," Mathers replied calmly, gesturing to the leather armchairs near the fireplace. "Thank you for coming. Sit if you like. We have business to discuss." Ethan remained standing a moment, studying the man's posture, his unwavering gaze. Something about him radiated a quiet confidence that put Ethan on alert. Finally, Ethan lowered himself into an armchair, arms resting on the plush armrests. Mathers took the opposite seat, crossing one leg over the other. "I understand you're with the Caldwell board, or at least affiliated with them," Ethan began, voice clipped. "You can cut the pleasantries. Why are you here?" Mathers leaned forward slightly. "I'm not precisely from the board," he said, "though I do have certain ties. I'm here because a group of influential shareholders sent me to assess your situation and your willingness to negotiate." He paused, letting his words hang. "We know the board is poised to oust you as CEO, but there may be arrangements that prevent such an outcome if you're amenable." "Arrangements," Ethan repeated, a note of skepticism creeping in. "Are you trying to say there's a backroom deal on offer?" Mathers spread his hands in a placating gesture. "Let's not be so blunt. Think of it as a strategic partnership. The board doesn't want Caldwell Industries to collapse under scandal. They want stability and profits. If you're willing to cede certain powers, make certain concessions, we can stabilize your leadership." Ethan felt a stab of anger. "So it's a power grab? They're blackmailing me into handing over partial control?" Mathers's lips curved in a polite, humorless smile. "We call it compromise. You keep the title of CEO, remain the public figure, but the final decision-making in certain domains would rest with others on the board. This arrangement spares you from a humiliating dethronement. It also spares the company from a messy public feud. In return, you follow the board's direction where it matters most: finance, strategic expansions, partnerships." Ethan's gut churned. This was precisely the sort of corporate sabotage he'd feared, masked behind smiles and strategic partnership language. "I built my father's expansions from the ground up after he passed," he said tightly. "I'm not relinquishing the company's future just to appease some shady alliance. Caldwell Industries was my family's dream long before the board took shape." Mathers's expression hardened. "I understand your pride, but pride can lead to downfall. If the shareholders withdraw support, your stocks plummet further and you'll be forced out with nothing. Let's not pretend you're in a strong position, Mr. Caldwell." Ethan inhaled sharply. He recalled how Lucy had described the silent threats that once surrounded her. Was this man connected to that as well, or was it a separate fiasco? "I have more leverage than you think," Ethan countered, though he wasn't fully certain of that. "I won't be bullied. If certain board members want to sabotage me, I'll call an emergency stakeholder meeting and reveal their tactics." Mathers cocked his head, his voice growing cooler. "Then do it! But you'll find your father's legacy can be undone by a single wave of negative press. Our group is prepared to release damaging details if necessary." Rage and apprehension knotted Ethan's stomach. He didn't show it outwardly, but inside, he felt a swirl of dread. Was this the link to the intimidation Lucy experienced long ago, or just more typical corporate extortion? "Is that a threat?" he asked quietly. "A fact," Mathers replied. "No one wants a scorched earth scenario. Sign the agreements I'll present and you'll stay in charge, at least in name. If not—" He shrugged, letting the silence speak volumes. Ethan forced himself to remain calm, though his thoughts raced. Let them threaten. He had to remember Lucy's predicament, the possibility that these same forces might also be behind what drove her away. "I need time to consider," he said finally, standing. "This kind of blackmail isn't something I respond to on the spot." Mathers inclined his head. "I'm leaving tomorrow for a brief trip, but I'll return in 2 days. Let's say you have until then. If you haven't come around by my next visit, the board moves forward without you." Ethan gave a clipped nod, turning on his heel. "I'll keep that in mind." He strode to the door, refusing to glance back. Even as he exited, he felt Mathers's gaze drilling into his back, like a silent weight of warning. In the corridor, Ethan paused, inhaling shakily. The conversation had rattled him more than he'd care to admit. The board was poised to remove him, armed with blackmail or twisted spin campaigns. If Ethan lost the company, how could he shield Lucy and Dylan from any fallout or threats? If the same people behind the intimidation were now pushing to control Caldwell Industries, that spelled danger. Yet he refused to hand over the empire his family had built just to appease these corporate wolves. Needing fresh air, he headed for the nearest exit, ignoring curious glances from passing staff. Outside, the wind whipped around him, stinging cold. He trudged through the snow, mind whirling with strategies, fending off the board, ensuring Lucy's safety, forging a bond with Dylan. Every part of his life was colliding at once. But with a father's sense of protectiveness newly awakened in his chest, Ethan felt a fierce resolve burn brighter than ever. He would find a way to defend them both, Lucy and Dylan, and Caldwell Industries. In the distance, the grand peaks of the mountain range towered, timeless and indifferent to human strife. The resort's lights blinked against the late afternoon sky, a beacon of warmth in the snowy landscape. Ethan stared at that silhouette of the lodge, thinking of Lucy and Dylan inside, unsuspecting of the confrontation he'd just endured. He squared his shoulders. One thing was certain: no matter the cost, he wasn't running. For the sake of the child who was now, in every sense, his son, Ethan Caldwell would stand his ground against any threat, business or otherwise, and reclaim the future that had nearly slipped away once before. He turned back toward the lodge, exhaling a frosty breath. The path ahead felt fraught with perils, but also alive with possibilities he once believed lost forever. Sometimes the only way out was straight through, forging on until the storms broke and morning light found them victorious. He intended to see that morning light for Dylan's sake, come what may. Night fell quietly over the lodge, painting the snowy grounds in shades of blue and silver. Most guests retreated to their rooms or gathered around the grand fireplaces in the common areas. Outside, a gentle snowfall replaced the earlier flurries, each crystal catching faint moonlight. Upstairs, in one of the staff quarters, Lucy finished tucking Dylan into bed, heart still rattled by the day's developments. After the joyful afternoon in the lounge and courtyard, Dylan had babbled non-stop about Mr. Ethan, how funny he was, how he liked the same color checkers. Lucy had laughed softly, both warmed and pained by how easily her son and Ethan had clicked. At one point, Dylan even asked if they could all build a snowman together sometime. The innocence of his wish made Lucy promise she'd see what she could do, though inside she felt torn, knowing how precarious everything remained. She'd heard from Ms. Hawthorne that Mr. Mathers was leaving early the next morning for somewhere else, planning to return in a couple of days. Lucy suspected that gave Ethan a short reprieve from direct confrontation, but also meant a ticking clock was in motion. She caught herself anxiously checking the corridors whenever she ventured out, half expecting to see Mathers or some unknown figure watching her. But so far, no sign of trouble. Now, with Dylan asleep, Lucy quietly slipped into the hallway, hoping to meet Ethan again. They needed to compare notes on Mr. Mathers' visit. Plus, Lucy felt a strange need just to see him, to reassure herself that the bond forming between father and son was something neither corporate threats nor old shadows could tear apart. She texted him, heart pounding. "Dylan's asleep. Can we meet? Maybe near the laundry room on second floor. No one around at this hour." He replied almost instantly, "On my way." A flutter of anticipation coursed through her. After verifying that Dylan was tucked in safe, Lucy left, moving quietly past other staff doors. She descended the back staircase to the second floor, lights dimmed for the night. The laundry room sat at the end of the corridor, a humble space with industrial washing machines and shelves of linens. After hours, it was mostly abandoned. Lucy slipped inside, the fluorescent overhead humming to life automatically. The smell of detergent and fabric softener lingered in the warm air. Moments later, Ethan appeared in the doorway. Their eyes met, a silent rush of relief crossing both faces. He eased the door shut behind him, stepping into the glow of the overhead lamp. Out of habit, Lucy cast a nervous glance at the hall window, ensuring no one lingered. "Hey," he said softly, voice tinged with weariness. "Thanks for texting. I was just going through some notes with Trevor." Lucy offered a tight smile. "Everything okay?" He exhaled and leaned against a metal folding table. As okay as it can be, given the circumstances. Mathers basically delivered an ultimatum. I either sign away some major control of Caldwell Industries, or they'll push me out entirely, maybe release negative press, tank the company's stock, all their usual sabotage tactics. Her chest tightened. "I'm so sorry, that's awful. Do you think they're connected to what happened with me, or is this just corporate bullying?" Ethan frowned, pushing a hand through his hair. "Unclear. Mathers didn't hint at anything about you or the old threats, but that doesn't mean the same people aren't involved at a higher level. Right now, it looks more like board politics, but I refuse to underestimate them. If they knew about Dylan or used it against me, who knows what might happen." Lucy nodded solemnly. The memory of those anonymous notes and warnings that drove her away resurfaced like a chill down her spine. "I can't stand the thought of them leveraging your fatherhood for some power play," she muttered. "So what will you do?" Ethan's jaw set. "I won't hand my family's legacy to these vultures, but I can't just barge into a board meeting unprepared. Trevor's assembling evidence of the board's shady dealings, things that might counterbalance their blackmail. If we can prove they've manipulated finances or engaged in unethical partnerships, it might scare them off." Lucy moved closer, drawn by his quietly fierce resolve. "Is that dangerous? Digging into their secrets?" "Potentially, but it's the only way," Ethan replied. "And I have to believe that if these are truly separate matters from the old threats, we'll handle them. But if they're connected..." His expression darkened. "They'll regret trying to intimidate me again." Her hand found his arm, a small show of support. "I'm with you. Whatever happens," she said, voice trembling yet determined. "I'm not running this time, and Dylan..." She swallowed. "He's so thrilled about you already. I won't uproot him again." Ethan's gaze softened at the mention of their son. He brushed her hand gently. "I can't describe what it meant to spend time with him. For a moment, it felt like the rest of the world vanished." His eyes flicked to the door as though worried about eavesdroppers, then back to her. "Thank you for making that possible." Lucy managed a small smile. "He asked if we could build a snowman together. Maybe tomorrow, if your schedule allows? We have a day off from bigger events, so the courtyard might be free." A flicker of genuine happiness lit Ethan's face. "I'd love that. Let's do it, assuming no emergencies crop up." They locked eyes, hearts brimming with the promise of normalcy. In that stolen moment, Lucy felt an ache of nostalgia for a life they might have had, waking up together, raising Dylan without fear, building the philanthropic dreams they once discussed. Could they still forge some version of that future? There were no guarantees, but hope flickered nonetheless. As if reading her mind, Ethan's hand slid from her arm to her shoulder, resting there gently. They stood in a hush, broken only by the gentle thrum of the laundry machines. Lucy's breath caught. The distance they'd maintained, the barriers, felt fragile now. Emotions swelled, old wounds mixing with new longings. Slowly, Ethan leaned in, hesitating mere inches from her face, silently asking for permission. She closed her eyes, heart pounding, and leaned the rest of the way until their lips met in a tentative kiss. It was soft, filled with uncertainty, regret, yet also an undercurrent of desperate yearning. Lucy felt tears prick her eyes, a surge of memories flooding back, the first time they kissed years ago, the late-night study sessions that turned into whispered confessions of love. Then the cruelty of that last month before the wedding, the cruel threats, her terrified departure. Now, as they parted, Lucy's cheeks warmed, breath unsteady. Ethan's eyes shone with emotion. I'm sorry," he murmured. "Did I overstep?" She shook her head. "No, I just wasn't sure if—" Her voice faltered. "I'm still scared of all the unknowns, but I do care about you, Ethan. That never changed." Relief and longing warred on his face. "I care about you too, always have. Even after you vanished, I—" A sudden noise interrupted them, the creak of the laundry room door. They jumped apart instantly, hearts hammering. One of the night shift staff poked her head in, blinking in surprise at seeing them. "Oh, I'm sorry," said the woman carrying a stack of towels. "I just came to change the machine. Didn't know anyone was here." Lucy cleared her throat, cheeks flushed. "No worries, I was just finishing some inventory. And Mr. Caldwell needed a spare blanket." She improvised quickly, pointing vaguely to a shelf. "We'll, get out of your way." The staff member nodded uncertainly, stepping aside to let them pass. Lucy and Ethan slipped out into the corridor, each studiously avoiding the woman's curious look. Once the door closed behind them, Lucy's shoulders shook with nervous laughter. "That was close." Ethan let out a breath. "We need to be more careful." But a small, almost bashful smile touched his lips. "You okay?" She nodded, though her pulse still raced. She couldn't believe how that kiss had stirred every emotion she'd locked away for 5 years. "I'm okay. Better than okay." She met his gaze squarely. "But let's keep this between us for now. We have enough complications." "Absolutely," Ethan agreed. "And Lucy, no matter what happens with the board, or whoever threatened you in the past, I promise I won't abandon you or Dylan." It was the kind of vow she once yearned to hear. She believed him, but also knew that circumstances could spiral out of control. "Thank you," she said, voice husky with tears she refused to shed. "You'd better get some rest. Tomorrow? Snowman Day?" He grinned softly. "Snowman Day," he repeated. Then, after another brief moment of hesitation, he stepped forward and pressed a light, brief kiss to her forehead. It felt like a silent seal on their fragile promise. "Good night." "Night," she whispered. They parted ways in the corridor, Ethan heading for the VIP elevator. Lucy ascended the back stairs to her attic-level room, checking her phone repeatedly as if expecting some crisis. But there were no new messages. She slipped inside, finding Dylan still sound asleep, the hush of the lodge pressing around them. She sank onto her bed, heart swirling with possibility and dread. The next morning brought fresh sunlight and a thin dusting of new snow, perfect for building a snowman. Lucy woke Dylan with excitement, telling him they might have a special friend joining them if he wanted to play outside. He squealed happily, already guessing it was Ethan. By mid-morning, Lucy guided him to a quiet side courtyard, far from the main entrance. She had texted Ethan the location, a place generally ignored by most guests. Dylan wore bright mittens and a puffy jacket, stumbling through knee-deep snow and chattering about how big the snowman should be. Lucy laughed, chasing him around with handfuls of loose flakes, shaping the base of a snowman mound. A few minutes later, Ethan appeared, similarly bundled in a coat and knitted cap. At first, Lucy saw a flicker of anxiety in his eyes, maybe scanning for paparazzi or onlookers. But as soon as Dylan greeted him with a gleeful shout, Ethan's tension melted into a genuine smile. The three set to work, rolling snowballs across the courtyard to form segments of the snowman. Dylan insisted on making it the biggest in the world. Lucy teased that they'd need a ladder for that, but they tried anyway, forging 2 large spheres and a smaller one for the head. Ethan discreetly snagged a few pine cones from the edge of the forest for eyes and buttons. As they worked, Lucy found herself grinning so widely her cheeks ached. She couldn't recall the last time she'd felt so light-hearted, especially with Ethan by her side, both of them indulging in playful banter. Dylan squealed when Ethan pretended to lose balance, nearly dropping the head of the snowman. Lucy caught it, the 2 adults dissolving into laughter. Finally, they hoisted the top ball in place, stuck pine cones for eyes and mouth, and used a crooked twig for a nose. Lucy rummaged in her pocket for a spare scarf, which she wrapped around the snowman's neck. Dylan clapped, face glowing with pride. "We did it!" Ethan surveyed the somewhat lopsided creation with mock seriousness. "He's a handsome fellow," he declared, adjusting the twig nose. Then he offered Dylan a playful wink. "Should we name him?" Lucy and Dylan brainstormed names: Frosty, Sir Snowington, Captain Icy, until they settled on Professor Snow, a compromise of sorts. They all giggled as Lucy introduced the snowman, prompting them to tip invisible hats in mock greeting. For a blissful span of minutes, it was as though they were a regular family enjoying winter fun. Lucy felt her chest constrict with a bitter-sweet longing. This was how it was supposed to be. 2 parents, 1 child, simple happiness. She nearly forgot the looming threats, Mathers, the board's schemes, the unanswered questions of the past. Only when Dylan started to shiver did Lucy's practical instincts resurface. "Time to head inside," she announced. "You're turning into a snowman yourself, buddy." He whined a bit but nodded, lips quivering. Ethan brushed snow off Dylan's jacket, tension creeping back into his shoulders as if remembering he couldn't linger publicly too long. Lucy picked Dylan up, carrying him against her hip, and gave Ethan a meaningful look. "Thank you," she whispered, "for coming." He nodded. "Any time," he murmured. "I'll be around. Just text me if you need me. I'll do the same." They parted ways at the staff entrance, Ethan slipping away to avoid curious guests. Dylan, still chattering about building a second snowman tomorrow, didn't even notice. Lucy escorted him to their room for hot cocoa and dry clothes. Once there, though, as Dylan sipped from a steaming mug, Lucy realized how easily she was falling into these moments with Ethan, moments that blurred the line between old heartbreak and new hope. Would it all come crashing down when the board's showdown intensified? What if the same forces that once drove her away returned, now with more reason to strike? She shook off the dread, forcing a smile for Dylan. Her child's smile was enough to remind her why she was standing her ground. A short while later, Ms. Hawthorne radioed Lucy about a housekeeping shuffle. Someone called out sick, meaning Lucy had more suites to handle. She sighed, checking the time. Dylan had a half-day in the staff daycare anyway, so she could drop him off soon. As she prepared to leave, Dylan piped up, "Mr. Ethan is really nice, Mom. He's like he's known me a long time. Do you think he'll stay here forever?" His innocent question made Lucy's throat tighten. She ruffled his hair, avoiding his gaze. "We'll see, sweetie. He's got a lot of grown-up stuff to figure out. But I know he really likes spending time with you." Dylan grinned, satisfied with that. Meanwhile, Lucy's mind swirled. How would they tell him that Ethan was actually his father? Soon, no doubt. Each passing moment made it harder to conceal, especially now that Dylan was forging a real attachment. She dreaded the questions, the confusion, the possible heartbreak if any of them had to leave. But as she handed Dylan off to the friendly daycare worker again, Lucy locked her resolve. She wanted to trust that Ethan would protect them, that they could face whatever came next as a united force. For Dylan's sake, she was done living in fear. A dull ache of foreboding lingered, however, as she recalled how swiftly illusions could shatter. She only prayed that this time the threat could be neutralized before it tore them apart again. 2 days passed in a relative lull. Mr. Mathers had departed the morning after his ultimatum, leaving a palpable sense of impending collision looming over Ethan. Yet in that interim, no immediate disaster struck. Lucy tried to keep her mind firmly on day-to-day tasks. Housekeeping schedules, checking in and out for new arrivals, and, in rare spare moments, watching Dylan gleefully play with Ethan in the lodge's quieter spaces. In that stretch of time, no one else suspicious appeared at the resort. Paparazzi didn't swarm the premises. The staff seemed more preoccupied with a minor plumbing issue in one of the guest wings than with any rumored scandal. Lucy began to wonder if her years of living in hiding had been for nothing, if perhaps that unknown threat truly had vanished along with her old life. Yet she saw how Ethan's tension simmered just beneath the surface. He had phone calls at odd hours with his assistant Trevor, his expression darkening whenever they discussed the board's shifting alliances. Once, Lucy glimpsed him pacing in a secluded hallway, phone pressed to his ear, voice tight with frustration. She knew the clock ticked on Mather's return, and with him, whatever confrontation or blackmail the board intended to force on Ethan. Dylan remained blissfully unaware of those stakes. He pestered Ethan for more snowman adventures, insisted they try every flavored cocoa the lodge's cafe offered, and bragged to the other kids that he had a super cool friend who liked to draw airplanes with him. Lucy overheard this bravado and felt a pang. Soon she and Ethan would have to tell Dylan the truth, but perhaps it was better if they waited until the board situation wasn't so volatile. On the morning of Mather's scheduled return, Lucy woke early. She peered out the attic window, noticing the sky was overcast, heavy with the promise of more snow. Dylan still slept, hugging a plush toy. Lucy quietly dressed, feeling a swirl of tension in her stomach. She suspected Ethan was anxious too. Mathers had given him until today to decide, sign away his power or be destroyed publicly. The thought enraged and frightened Lucy in equal measure. But there was also a new, pressing matter on her mind, something that had been growing harder to ignore each time Dylan casually referred to Ethan as Mom's friend. After her shift, Lucy planned to ask Ethan if they could sit Dylan down and begin explaining that Ethan was more than a friend. She believed her son deserved the truth, however messy it might be. The day began in an unsettling calm. Lucy attended to her usual routine, cleaning certain VIP suites, organizing special requests. Staff buzzed over walkie-talkies about a rumored snowstorm picking up in the afternoon. Then, just before lunchtime, Ms. Hawthorne caught Lucy in the corridor. "Have you heard from Mr. Caldwell? Mr. Mathers arrived about half an hour ago and he's been asking to meet." Lucy stiffened. "No, not yet. I'll see if I can find him." She tried texting Ethan, but no reply came. Worry gnawed at her. The last she'd heard, Trevor was finalizing some new angle of evidence that might give Ethan leverage. Perhaps Ethan was busy on a tense phone call. Still, Lucy felt uneasy. She told Ms. Hawthorne she'd keep trying and went in search of him, checking the greenhouse first, then the lounge. No sign of him. Staff members reported glimpsing him on the first-floor corridor but hadn't noticed which way he went. Finally, Lucy stopped at his suite, the Eagle's Nest. She knocked quietly. No answer. Tentatively, she let herself in with the staff master key. Inside, the space looked in slight disarray. A half-finished cup of coffee on the table, papers scattered over the desk, a laptop still open, screensaver swirling. But Ethan was nowhere to be found. Her phone buzzed, and she grabbed it, hoping it was him. Instead, it was Ms. Hawthorne again. "Mr. Mathers is demanding to speak with Caldwell. Any update?" Lucy frowned, texting back, "Still searching. Let me try a few more places." She decided to check the staff daycare in case Ethan had gone to see Dylan. But Dylan was there alone, painting a watercolor of snowy mountains. Lucy crouched beside him, forcing a calm tone. "Hey, buddy, have you seen Mr. Ethan?" Dylan shook his head, brushing hair from his eyes. "Not today," he said. "Mom, is everything okay?" Lucy mustered a reassuring smile. "Yes, sweetie, all good. Just need to find him." Leaving Dylan in the daycare's care, Lucy pressed on. Anxiety mounted with each step. Where could Ethan have gone? She tried phoning him directly, straight to voicemail. Her mind jumped to worst-case scenarios. Had Mathers cornered him somewhere? Was Ethan ambushed by the same unseen forces that once threatened Lucy? As she hurried through a seldom-used corridor on the second floor, her phone buzzed again. The caller ID this time showed Ethan. Relief surged through her. She picked up. "Ethan, where are you? Everyone's looking." A voice interrupted, but it wasn't Ethan. Deep, controlled, yet somehow menacing. "Hello, Ms. Harding," it said calmly. "I'm afraid Mr. Caldwell can't come to the phone right now." Lucy's blood ran cold. Her pulse thundered in her ears. "Who is this? What have you—" "Relax," the voice said, amusement creeping in. "He's unharmed. For now. We simply needed a private conversation without him running off. I'm sure you understand." Lucy's heart hammered. "You let me speak to him," she demanded, trying to steady her trembling voice. "This is kidnapping." "I wouldn't use such a harsh term," the voice replied. "We're simply negotiating, and we'd like your cooperation. If you'd like Mr. Caldwell to remain safe, come to the old storage warehouse behind the staff parking lot. Alone. Do you know it?" Her mind reeled. That decrepit building was used mostly for storing outdated furniture. "Yes," she whispered, panic roiling in her gut. 30 minutes, the voice said. "If you call the police or bring anyone else, we'll know, and Mr. Caldwell's situation will change." The line went dead. For a moment, Lucy just stood frozen, phone clutched in a white-knuckled grip. Her worst fears had materialized. Someone had Ethan, threatening him, and that someone apparently knew her name, her connection to him. Bile rose in her throat. She had to do something, but what? If she went alone, she might be walking into a trap. Yet the alternative, calling security or Ms. Hawthorne, risked Ethan's safety. She inhaled shakily, thinking of Dylan. If she disappeared, who would protect him? But she couldn't leave Ethan to these monsters, whoever they were. Desperation seized her. She had to act. She dashed toward the staff daycare, telling herself to stay calm. Entering the daycare room, Lucy quickly sought out Mrs. Summers. Something came up," Lucy lied, panic beneath her words. "An emergency. Please keep Dylan until I return. Don't let him leave with anyone else, okay?" Mrs. Summers frowned, sensing Lucy's distress. "Of course, dear. Is everything all right?" Lucy forced a nod, refusing to betray her panic in front of Dylan. "I'll be back soon. Please, just watch him carefully." She tried to sound casual, but the teacher looked worried. Still, she agreed. Lucy bent to Dylan, who was painting a second mountain scene. She kissed his hair, forcing a shaky smile. "I'll see you soon, buddy," she whispered, voice tight. Dylan blinked up at her, sensing something off. "Mom? You look scared," he murmured. "I'm fine," she managed, ruffling his hair. "Just grown-up stuff." Then she slipped away before he could question her further. Racing through the lodge halls, Lucy was painfully aware that any staff or security alerted could endanger Ethan. The criminals must have eyes on the resort. She prayed Ms. Hawthorne wouldn't notice her abrupt absence. She hurried out a back entrance, stepping into the chill afternoon air. The sky was graying, wind picking up as snow flurried. The staff parking lot lay behind the lodge, ringed by tall pines. A short distance beyond sat a squat, windowless warehouse used for old furniture storage. Barely anyone ventured there in winter. Lucy trudged through the snow, her heart pounding. Her phone grip was sweaty despite the cold. She reached the building's side entrance, a heavy metal door that stood ajar, presumably left that way so she could enter. Lucy's breath plumed in the icy air. Carefully she slipped inside, eyes adjusting to dim light filtering through a few grimy overhead fixtures. Old sofas, broken tables, and various crates formed a disorganized maze. The smell of dust and neglect hung in the air. "Hello?" she called, voice echoing. Her heart hammered so loud she could barely think. "Where's Ethan?" A figure stepped out from behind a tall stack of chairs. Another man emerged at the opposite side, blocking Lucy's potential escape route. Both wore dark coats, gloves, faces partially obscured by scarves. One raised a phone as if filming or ready to show evidence. From behind a stack of crates, a third figure appeared, tall, imposing, wearing tinted glasses. He dragged Ethan forward by the arm. Ethan's wrists were zip-tied, his hair disheveled, a small cut on his temple. He looked dazed but alive, eyes widening upon seeing Lucy. Relief and alarm mingled in his gaze. "Lucy." "No," Ethan croaked. "Why did you come?" He was silenced by the tall man pressing an elbow into his side. Ethan hissed in pain, forced to his knees. Lucy lunged forward, but the second henchman blocked her, pressing a gun barrel lightly against her shoulder. Her stomach lurched in terror. "Stop!" the tall man commanded calmly. "He's fine, Ms. Harding, so long as you cooperate." She swallowed, tears burning her eyes. "What do you want? Money?" A dry laugh came from behind the scarf. "Money? Perhaps, but more importantly, leverage. We know who you are, and we know about your son. You see, Mr. Caldwell's choice has a direct impact on many of us. We're here to make sure he chooses wisely." Lucy's world spun. They did know about Dylan. Her voice shook. "Don't you dare involve my child. This is between you and Ethan." The man stepped closer, towering over her. "Everything is between us now," he said quietly. "The board meltdown, Caldwell Industries, your little secret. Mr. Caldwell was asked to sign certain agreements. He's refused, citing new evidence. We want that evidence destroyed, and we want his compliance. Otherwise—" He gestured with a nod to Ethan, pinned down by the henchman's grip. Ethan spat. "I'll never sign your filthy contracts. This is a criminal act." His captor tightened his hold, forcing Ethan's arms backward. Lucy cried out, "Stop, please!" The tall man turned to Lucy, adjusting his tinted glasses. "It seems you're the only person Mr. Caldwell truly listens to, Ms. Harding. Remind him of the cost of defiance. If he doesn't comply, we can make your son vanish as easily as you did 5 years ago." Lucy's blood froze. "No, you can't. I'll go to the police," he scoffed, pressing the gun barrel nearer. "Try it. Your phone is being tracked, your every move monitored. We have people in high places. If you defy us, your child pays. So, do you still want to gamble?" Lucy's vision blurred with tears. She thought of Dylan's bright eyes, his joyous grin. She couldn't let these monsters hurt him. Her gaze flicked to Ethan, who struggled, face contorted with guilt and rage. "Let her go," Ethan growled. "This is my fight. She and Dylan have nothing to do with it." "Wrong," the man hissed. "They have everything to do with it. You threatened to expose certain people in the board's circle, dirty deals, hush money, old secrets. That cannot be allowed. Either you sign the agreement relinquishing your controlling interest, or your precious family gets destroyed. We don't care which." Lucy's knees trembled, her breath ragged. She recalled the old threats, how they forced her away to protect Ethan and her unborn child. Now these shadows had re-emerged, more blatant than ever, using both Lucy and Dylan as leverage to break Ethan's will. Anger and terror churned in her gut. Ethan, panting, locked eyes with Lucy. She saw desperation there. He hated giving in, but he wanted her and Dylan safe. "Lucy," he croaked, "don't worry. Shut it!" one henchman snapped, jamming an elbow into Ethan's side again. He grunted in pain, doubling over. Lucy's tears spilled. Enough. Her fear morphed into fierce protectiveness. Her voice quavered, yet she forced it out. "I'll do whatever you want. Just don't hurt Ethan or Dylan." The tall man smirked behind his scarf, triumphant. "Good. Now, Mr. Caldwell will sign these documents." He nodded at another henchman who produced a folder from a crate. "And the original evidence you've compiled will be surrendered. No leaks, no exposure. Then you'll both keep your precious boy safe. Are we clear?" Ethan's gaze burned with refusal, but Lucy knew they had no time for heroics. If they resisted outright, Dylan was at risk. She whispered Ethan's name, stepping closer. "Please," she pleaded in a trembling voice, "just do what they say for now. We can't let them hurt him." Rage and heartbreak warred on Ethan's face. He hesitated, fists clenched. Then he nodded, voice thick with defeat. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll sign under duress." With cruel efficiency, they forced Ethan to kneel at an old table, wrists still bound, as one henchman flipped open the folder and pointed to pages. Lucy hovered close, tears rolling down her cheeks, terrified yet trying to project solidarity. She prayed Ethan had a plan, that this was just a temporary concession until he could strike back. The tall man hovered, gun still in hand, ensuring Lucy didn't interfere. "Sign them," he repeated, tone ice cold. Ethan stared at the legal documents, pen trembling in his fingers. Then, with a silent glare of hatred, he scrawled his signature in the designated spots. Lucy could practically feel his anguish. He was ceding the controlling stake of Caldwell Industries, effectively surrendering his family's legacy. All for her and Dylan. Once finished, the henchman snatched up the folder, checking each line. A satisfied nod. "Good," the tall man said. He turned to Lucy. "Now, the evidence. Your little sidekick Trevor has an encrypted drive, yes? Where is it?" Ethan didn't answer, jaws clenched. The man raised his gun, aiming directly at Lucy. "Shall I rephrase?" Lucy gasped, throwing up her hands in fear. "Don't!" Ethan relented. "My suite, hidden in the fireplace alcove. The encryption key is on my laptop. Take it. I'll tell you the password." "Smart choice," the man sneered. One henchman left immediately, presumably to retrieve it. Time crawled in suffocating dread. Lucy stood helpless, her heart pounding, wishing for any chance to call for help, to fight back. But they were outnumbered, armed men controlling every move. She ached for Dylan, safe in daycare for now, but for how long if these thugs decided to escalate? Finally, the tall man stepped back, gesturing to Ethan. "Knock him out," he told the other henchman. Lucy cried in protest, but the henchman slammed the butt of his pistol into Ethan's head before he could brace. Ethan collapsed with a grunt, losing consciousness. Lucy screamed, rushing forward. Another henchman grabbed her, yanking her back. "Enough!" hissed the tall man. "He'll wake later. Consider yourselves warned. If you breathe a word of this to the lodge staff or the police, we'll return. And next time we won't spare the child. Understood?" Lucy, sobbing, nodded desperately. "Please, just let me help him." The man released her with a shove. Ethan lay on the cold floor, blood trickling from his temple. The tall man's voice reverberated with finality. "This ends now. No more evidence, no retaliation. You keep quiet, and your son lives. Try anything else, and you'll lose everything. We're finished here." With that, the men vanished into the shadowy corners of the warehouse, leaving Lucy to scramble to Ethan's side. Her hands shook violently as she cradled his head. Blood matted his hair. He was breathing, but unconscious, his face pale. Lucy fumbled for her phone, wanting to call an ambulance, but fear paralyzed her. What if they were watching, waiting for her to call 911, punishing her by going after Dylan? Tears blurred her vision. She pressed trembling fingers to Ethan's pulse, still strong, but he needed medical help. Mind racing, Lucy realized she could sneak him back to the lodge, maybe call Trevor or Ms. Hawthorne discreetly for a doctor. The criminals had said no police, but she couldn't leave him here. Gritting her teeth, Lucy carefully propped Ethan up, removing the zip tie from his wrists with a pair of scissors she found on a dusty shelf. He stirred faintly, eyes flickering. She half-carried, half-dragged him toward the door, every step an agony of fear. Outside, the snow pelted them with a biting wind. Lucy's breath came in gasps, adrenaline fueling her. They reached the lodge's back entrance somehow, Lucy's shoulders numb from supporting Ethan's weight. She avoided the main corridors, leading him through staff hallways until she found an unoccupied storage room. Flicking on the light, she gently lowered him against a wall. He groaned, blinking slowly. "Lucy," he rasped. "They took everything." She knelt, tears falling unrestrained. "Shh, it's okay. We'll get you help." "Dylan," he slurred, trying to sit up. "Are they—" "He's safe. He's fine," Lucy whispered, heart in her throat. "But we need a doctor for you. We'll—" He shook his head, wincing. "Can't alert paramedics. They'll see the injuries, ask questions. Those bastards will come after Dylan." Lucy's tears burned hotter. He was right. They had to be cautious. She pressed a cloth to his temple to stanch the bleeding. "Then let me call Trevor or Ms. Hawthorne. We can handle this privately." Ethan winced, breathing raggedly. "Trevor, maybe, but not Ms. Hawthorne. She might feel obligated to involve authorities." He coughed, pain etched on his face. "I can't lose you two." Lucy bit her lip to keep from sobbing. This was madness. They were hostages to threats once again, just as Lucy had been years ago. But now Ethan knew the depth of that fear, the helplessness. She brushed his hair gently, voice raw. "I'm so sorry. You gave up so much to keep us safe. I shouldn't have let you face them alone." He squeezed her hand weakly. "You had no choice." Then his eyes fluttered. "Need rest." He almost passed out again. Lucy steadied him, tears dripping onto the dusty floor. "Don't you dare leave me," she whispered fiercely. "We'll figure a way out. I promise." Her phone buzzed. Ms. Hawthorne again, no doubt. Lucy ignored it, instead texting Trevor in a frantic rush. "Ethan injured. Need discreet medical help ASAP. Storage RM second fellas. Hurry. No cops. Danger to Dylan." She prayed Trevor would act swiftly. Then, cradling Ethan's head in her lap, Lucy realized her life had come full circle, once more pinned by fear for her child, forced into secrecy by monstrous threats who believed they could control the Caldwell family through terror. She glanced at the door, heart pounding. If these criminals were still watching, they'd see she was disobeying by seeking help. But she had no choice. Ethan needed care, and Dylan needed a father. All Lucy could do now was wait in trembling vigil, her tears falling on Ethan's unconscious form, silently praying for Trevor to arrive, hoping that somehow this time they wouldn't have to let evil triumph, hoping that father, mother, and son might still find a way to break free of the shadows that had nearly destroyed them once, and threatened to do so again. It took less than 15 minutes, though it felt like an eternity, for Trevor to arrive. Every creak in the hallway made Lucy's heart skip, but at last the door eased open to reveal the thin, bespectacled man carrying a small medical kit. He spotted Lucy cradling the half-conscious Ethan on the floor and froze in horror. "Oh my God," he breathed. "What?" Lucy's voice trembled as she cut him off. "They ambushed him, forced him to sign away his company, threatened Dylan." She pressed a fresh rag to Ethan's temple. Blood had dried into his hair, though the wound still seeped slightly. "We can't go to the hospital. They'll know. They're watching us." Trevor nodded, jaw tight. "We'll keep it quiet," he said, dropping to his knees. He pulled disinfectant and gauze from the kit and began cleaning the cut with careful efficiency. "I've had some first aid training," he explained shakily. "But if he's got a concussion—" "We'll deal with it," Lucy whispered, tears in her eyes. "Just help him now, please." Ethan moaned, eyes fluttering open. He winced under Trevor's ministrations but remained mostly coherent this time. "Trevor," he rasped, a look of regret crossing his features. "I'm sorry, they took the files, gone." "I know," Trevor muttered, pressing gauze to the wound. "We'll figure it out later, sir." He spared a glance at Lucy. "For now, we get you patched up." While Trevor worked, Lucy tried to calm her panic enough to think clearly. The criminals had gotten everything they wanted. Ethan's signature on the controlling interest documents, plus all the incriminating evidence that might have let them fight back. Now they were effectively pinned. He couldn't reveal the kidnapping or blackmail without risking Dylan's safety. It felt like an impossible trap. Once the bleeding slowed, Trevor helped Ethan to his feet, draping one of Ethan's arms across his own shoulders for support. Lucy steadied him from the other side. They guided him out of the storage room, moving in tense silence through back corridors. If a staff member passed, Lucy pretended to be assisting a tipsy or ill guest. They made it to Ethan's suite without encountering anyone suspicious. Once inside, Lucy and Trevor eased him onto the couch. "Thank you," Ethan croaked. His face was still ashen, a bruise forming on his cheek, but at least he was awake. "Trevor, talk to me. Did the board file come in? The one that might tie them to illegal deals?" Trevor grimaced, setting his medical kit on the coffee table. "It arrived an hour ago, but the men who attacked you took your encryption key, right? They'll be searching for any backups. If they realize we still have the raw data, they could come after us again." He hesitated. "And you're in no shape to fight them head-on. Plus, we risk Dylan's safety if we provoke them." A sickening hush fell. Lucy hovered near the couch, heart pounding. "So what do we do? Just let them win?" Ethan closed his eyes, a muscle tightening in his jaw. "I can't let them keep control of Caldwell Industries, but I won't risk Dylan." He drew a shaky breath. "Trevor, for now, hide that new file somewhere no one can trace. Don't even open it. If these people get a whiff that we still have a trump card, they might escalate. We'll bide our time." Trevor nodded, though it was clear the plan pained him. "All right, I'll stash it on an offline drive. No digital trail. In the meantime, we need to keep up appearances, act like we're defeated, that you've surrendered control." Ethan's eyes burned with bitterness. That's exactly what they want. But if it keeps Lucy and Dylan safe... He swallowed, and his voice dropped. "Lucy, I'm so sorry. You tried to protect me all those years ago, and now here we are again." She knelt beside the couch, gently clasping his hand. "You saved us from them," she said, tears threatening to fall again. "Don't apologize. You paid for my mistakes. If I hadn't run away..." He silenced her with a faint squeeze of her fingers. "No," he murmured. "We were victims of the same threat, just at different times." Pain flickered in his gaze as he recalled the strike to his head. "But now, I can't lose you and Dylan. I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe." Lucy's tears slipped free. She bowed her head, pressing his hand to her cheek. Trevor cleared his throat, stepping discreetly away to give them a moment. The quiet hum of the suite's heating system underscored the fragile resolve binding them together. After a time, Lucy pulled herself together. "We have to make them believe we're beaten. That means not telling Ms. Hawthorne, not calling the police." Ethan nodded wearily. "And from the outside, it'll look like I willingly ceded power to the board, for now." His jaw clenched. "Eventually I'll find a way to expose them, perhaps with that raw data, but only once I'm certain Dylan won't be targeted." Trevor, returning, draped a spare blanket over Ethan's legs. "You should rest now, sir. Mild concussion, at least. Lucy, maybe keep an eye on him tonight?" She nodded, relief flooding her. She wanted nothing more than to stay close, ensuring his safety. But an immediate concern tugged at her mind. Dylan. She needed to check on him, reassure him. "I'll bring Dylan here after my shift," she offered softly. "We'll tell him you got a bit sick. He doesn't need to know the truth yet, right?" Ethan closed his eyes, exhaustion apparent. "Right. Don't scare him." Then his eyes opened, a flicker of guilt shining. "He deserves to know I'm his father, Lucy. But not like this. Not tonight. Not when I can barely keep my head from spinning." She squeezed his hand again. "We'll wait until you're stronger. Get some rest." Trevor helped Lucy arrange pillows so Ethan could lie comfortably, then hurried off to hide the new evidence. Lucy lingered, watching Ethan's breathing gradually deepen into a wary rest. Despite the heartbreak of this forced surrender, she felt an odd sense of relief just having him alive, knowing Dylan was safe upstairs. They might be cornered now, but at least they were cornered together. She brushed a lock of hair from Ethan's forehead, her heart heavy with both despair and fierce love. By the time Lucy returned to her duties, she was in a daze. All afternoon, she mechanically cleaned suites, replaced towels, and smiled politely at passing guests, all while her mind reeled with the memory of Ethan's abduction. Every phone call made her jump, convinced the criminals were watching her every move. She worried about Dylan's safety, though at least the daycare was supervised, and Mrs. Summers was vigilant. When she finally finished, Lucy retrieved Dylan and brought him to Ethan's suite, anxiously checking the corridors for suspicious onlookers. Trevor had tidied up the space, ensuring no sign of blood or struggle. Ethan lay on the couch, looking pale but somewhat more alert. Dylan bounded in, face lighting up, then frowned in concern. "Mr. Ethan? You look sick." Ethan forced a small smile. "I'm all right, buddy," he said gently, voice rough. "Just a headache." Dylan approached carefully, setting a small crayon drawing on the coffee table. "I made you a picture of the snowman we built," he announced, as if that alone might heal any ailment. Lucy's heart clenched at the boy's innocence. "Thanks," Ethan murmured, eyes flicking to Lucy, reflecting deep gratitude and heartbreak. I love it." He gingerly reached out, ruffling Dylan's hair. They spent a subdued hour together. Dylan chattered about birds he'd seen outside, while Lucy quietly brewed tea and served Ethan a bowl of soup from the staff kitchen. She insisted he eat, even if his appetite was poor. He managed a few spoonfuls before leaning back with a groan. Dylan, worried, rubbed his elbow. "You sure you're okay? My mom always makes me soup when I'm sick. She says it fixes everything." Ethan mustered a lopsided grin. "Your mom's probably right," he said softly, glancing at Lucy with an unspoken depth of emotion. "It's helping already." At bedtime, Lucy coaxed Dylan away, promising to let Ethan rest. She guided her son back to their attic room, tucking him in with extra care. But each question Dylan asked, "When can we build another snowman? Can Ethan stay with us forever?" made Lucy's chest tighten. She answered gently, promising tomorrow they'd visit him again. For tonight, Ethan needed quiet. Once Dylan drifted to sleep, Lucy's tears finally broke through. She slipped to the hallway, leaning against the wall. The criminals had them pinned in a silent war. One misstep, and Dylan could be in danger. Ethan had signed everything away. Caldwell Industries was now effectively under the board's manipulative thumb. The rightful CEO was left powerless, physically injured, and emotionally torn. She recalled how she fled years ago to protect Ethan from intimidation. Now, ironically, it was he who had endured brutality while protecting her and Dylan. A swirl of guilt, love, and fierce resolve churned. She couldn't let evil win this time. If the criminals thought they had shut her down, they underestimated a mother's determination to shield her child and a woman's drive to end the cycle of fear. But how? She had no resources, no influence, just an encrypted file Trevor had stashed away. Maybe that was a faint glimmer of hope if they could find a safe means to expose the board's wrongdoing. And maybe, just maybe, Lucy could glean if these criminals were the same who threatened her long ago. That puzzle still loomed. Who had benefited by driving her away back then? Dragging herself to bed, Lucy resolved to stand firm by Ethan's side. She wished she could confide in Ms. Hawthorne or call the police, but the memory of the gun pressed to Ethan's temple, his battered form on the warehouse floor, kept her silent. For Dylan's sake, she had to endure. The next morning, Ethan remained weak but insisted on not drawing suspicion. He refused to hole up in his suite like a hostage. Lucy and Trevor helped him dress carefully, covering bruises and injuries with clothes and a discreet cap. Dylan, still none the wiser, believed Ethan was just recovering from a migraine. Over breakfast, Ms. Hawthorne relayed that Mr. Mathers had officially checked out at dawn without a word. Lucy's stomach twisted, suspecting he'd left behind a network of watchers to ensure compliance. All that day, Lucy juggled her normal duties, covertly checking on Ethan when she could. They shared small, tense conversations in quiet corners, always scanning for watchers. Though battered, Ethan was determined to maintain a facade of normalcy. He even told Ms. Hawthorne he'd decided to meet the board's requests for the good of the company, an explanation that appeased her curiosity. At nightfall, Lucy and Dylan visited Ethan once more, giving him small joys, board games, a story, the sight of Dylan's bright smile. Each moment, Lucy felt the heartbreak of forced secrecy and the dread that the criminals might reappear at any moment. After Dylan went to bed, Lucy lingered with Ethan. His bruise had darkened, but his eyes were sharper. He took her hand quietly. "I can't let them get away with this forever," he said, voice trembling with anger. "But we need time, and we can't do it alone." Lucy sank onto the couch beside him, tears in her voice. "I'll help. I don't know how, but I'm done hiding. We'll find the right allies, maybe outside the board's reach. Prove what they've done. Just please, promise we'll keep Dylan out of harm's way." His fingers tightened around hers. "I promise," he said fervently. "And once we're safe, once we have a plan, I want Dylan to know the truth about me, if he'll still have me as his father." Emotions welled in Lucy's chest, but she managed a tremulous smile. "He will," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his. "He's already half in love with you." Her voice hitched. "We'll tell him soon." They sat like that for a while, simply breathing, leaning on each other in the quiet, lamp-lit suite. Neither had illusions that the danger was over. If anything, it loomed larger than ever. But at least they had each other's support, and they had Dylan's irrepressible light. Sometime around midnight, Lucy stood to leave, exhaustion sweeping over her. Ethan insisted she rest properly. "I'll manage," he said, forcing a faint grin. "I'm stubborn, remember?" She kissed his cheek gently, ignoring the pang that soared through her at the intimacy. "I remember," she whispered. "Take care." In the hallway, Lucy paused, tears threatening. She reminded herself that this wasn't the end, merely another battle in a war that started years ago. Now, father, mother, and child stood together, determined to protect each other from a threat that thrived on silence and fear. It would take cunning, courage, and possibly outside help to dismantle the criminals' hold on Caldwell Industries and on their lives. But Lucy felt a spark of hope. They had come too far, lost too many years to bow under intimidation again. The promise in Ethan's eyes and the warmth of Dylan's laughter fortified her. They would find a way, for the sake of the family they'd become, a family that no blackmailer or board of ruthless executives had the right to destroy. So ended one chapter of their struggle, yet Lucy felt certain a new one had just begun. The road ahead would be fraught, but they were no longer alone. Love, hope, and the fierce spirit of parenthood blazed in their hearts, guiding them toward a dawn where at last they might stand free of shadows and let the truth shine. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.